The red wine dripped from my daughter Maya's chin like fresh blood on fresh snow, staining her white silk blouse in a grotesque map of humiliation. The dining room of the Sterling estate was silent save for the dripping sound and the terrified whimper of my 12-year-old grandson Leo. I looked at Preston Sterling, the man holding the empty crystal goblet, and then I looked at Brad, my son-in-law. I waited for Brad to stand up. I waited for him to defend his wife. Instead, he laughed, a cold, cruel sound that echoed off the high, vaulted ceilings. "Thanks, Dad," he chuckled, sipping his own drink. "Maybe that will finally teach her some respect." I felt the leather of my chair creak as I gripped it. They thought I was just Elijah, the quiet old black man who spent his days gardening in a run-down house on the edge of town. They thought I was invisible. They had no idea that the man sitting at the end of their table was the silent owner of the debt that kept the roof over their heads. I stood up slowly, adjusted my tie, and pulled out my old flip phone. It was time to remind them who really owned the ground they walked on. Before I tell you how I brought an entire empire to its knees with a single sentence, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments if you have ever had to sit in silence while someone disrespected your family and what you did about it. I am Elijah Freeman, and for 50 years I moved cargo across the eastern seaboard, building a logistics empire that I kept hidden from everyone, even my own children. But tonight I was not a CEO. I was just a father watching his little girl get her heart broken. The evening had started with the usual suffocating pretension that defined the Sterling household. My daughter Maya had begged me to come. "Dad, please," she had whispered over the phone, her voice trembling with that desperate need to keep the peace. "It is Thanksgiving. Brad wants everyone together. His father is stressed about business, and I just need you there as a buffer." I had agreed because I could never say no to Maya. She was the spitting image of her mother Ruth, God rest her soul. The same high cheekbones, the same fierce intelligence, and unfortunately the same capacity to endure suffering for the sake of love. The Sterling mansion was a monument to old money, or at least the appearance of it. It sat on 3 acres of manicured lawn in the most exclusive zip code in Connecticut. Inside everything was white or beige or gold. It felt less like a home and more like a museum where you were afraid to breathe too hard for fear of tarnishing the air. We sat at a mahogany table long enough to land a small aircraft on. Preston Sterling sat at the head looking like a king on a throne that was slowly crumbling beneath him, though he would never admit it. I sat at the far end next to Leo. My grandson was the only bright spot in this mausoleum. He looked at me with wide conspiratorial eyes and squeezed my hand under the table. He knew Grandpa Elijah was more than he appeared. We had our secrets, Leo and I. He knew I didn't just grow tomatoes and fix fences. He knew I read the Financial Times cover to cover every morning before the sun came up. But tonight, Leo looked small and scared. He sensed the tension radiating off his father and grandfather like heat from a pavement in July. Dinner was an exercise in passive-aggressive warfare. Preston carved the turkey with violent, precise strokes, the silver knife flashing under the chandelier lights. He was 70 years old, a tall white man with a mane of silver hair and a face that had hardened into a permanent sneer of disapproval. He looked at me only once when I sat down, nodding briefly as if acknowledging the hired help before turning his attention back to the people he considered real. So Maya Preston began not looking at her, but focusing on a particularly stubborn joint of the bird. "Brad tells me you are still playing with your little drawings." Maya straightened her spine. It was a reflex I had seen 1,000 times. She was an architect, a brilliant one. She had graduated top of her class and had just led a team to redesign the city library, a project that had been in all the papers. "It is not playing Preston," she said, her voice steady but tight. "My firm just won the bid for the new cultural center downtown. It is a $20 million project." Preston scoffed, a short barking sound. "Affirmative action is a beautiful thing, isn't it? It opens so many doors that would otherwise stay locked." The air left the room. I saw Maya flinch as if she had been slapped. Brad sat next to her, chewing his stuffing, oblivious or perhaps simply uncaring. He was 42 years old, but in the presence of his father he reverted to a spineless teenager desperate for approval. Brad was handsome in a generic way, with a weak chin and eyes that always seemed to be looking for the next exit. He lived off a trust fund and a vice presidency at his father's real estate development firm, a job that mostly involved playing golf and signing papers he didn't read. "Actually, Dad," Brad said, his mouth full, "Maya has been working late a lot. I barely see her. I have to order takeout 3 times a week. It is getting ridiculous. He didn't defend her talent. He complained about his dinner. I felt a familiar heat rising in my chest, a slow burn that started in my gut. I remembered Ruth, my wife. I remembered how she used to scrub floors in houses just like this one. I remembered how she died of pneumonia because we couldn't afford the good doctors, the ones who didn't look at us with exhaustion before we even spoke. I had promised on her grave that our daughter would never know that feeling of being less than. I had failed. Maya put her fork down. Her hand was shaking. I earned that bid on merit, Preston, she said. The committee reviewed the designs blindly. They chose us because we were the best. Preston stopped carving. He laid the knife and fork down on the platter with a heavy clatter. He looked up, his eyes cold and blue and filled with a lifetime of unchecked privilege. Merit, he repeated the word, tasting sour in his mouth. Do not lecture me on merit, young lady. You people always talk about merit, but you are the first to cry victim when the real world gets too tough. You think because you married my son you are suddenly part of this class. You think you belong at this table. Preston. Please, Maya whispered, glancing at Leo, not in front of the boy. Oh, the boy needs to learn, Preston said, his voice rising. He needs to learn that blood matters, that heritage matters. He is lucky he has Sterling blood running through him to dilute the rest. That was it. The line had been crossed. I saw Maya push her chair back, her dignity finally outweighing her fear. We are leaving, she said, standing up. Come on, Leo, grab your coat. Sit down, Maya, Brad snapped. Stop being dramatic. Dad is just talking. He is stressed about the market. Don't make a scene. I am not making a scene, Brad, Maya said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. Your father is insulting me. He is insulting your son, and you are sitting there eating potatoes. Preston stood up then. He was a large man, imposing in his anger. His face flushed a deep, ugly red. You will sit down and you will show some gratitude, he bellowed. Who pays for the house you live in? Who pays for the car you drive? Who pays for the private school that boy goes to? Me. I pay for it. I bought you. I did not marry you for your money, Maya shouted back, losing her composure. I make my own money, and if Brad was half the man you think he is, we wouldn't need your help. The silence that followed that statement was absolute. Brad turned pale. Preston looked as if he had been struck. His chest heaved. His hand found the stem of his wine glass. It was a heavy crystal goblet filled to the brim with a vintage Cabernet Sauvignon, a bottle that probably cost more than my first car. In one fluid motion, fueled by rage and arrogance, Preston Sterling threw the contents of the glass across the table. The red liquid arced through the air like a wave. It hit Maya square in the face. It splashed into her eyes, her nose, her open mouth. It soaked her hair and ruined the white silk blouse she had bought specifically for this dinner, to look professional, to look worthy. She gasped blindingly, wiping at her eyes. The wine dripped onto the pristine white tablecloth, spreading like a gunshot wound. Leo screamed, a high-pitched, terrified sound. Grandpa, stop! I sat there frozen for a microsecond, my mind processing the sheer violence of the act. It was not just wine. It was a declaration. It was Preston telling us that we were dirt, that we were something to be washed away. The gravel of the Sterling estate driveway crunched beneath my work boots, a sound that felt like bones breaking under the weight of my anger. I did not look back. I had my left arm wrapped around my daughter Maya, shielding her from the cold November wind and the burning shame that radiated from the wine-soaked blouse clinging to her skin. My right hand held the small, trembling hand of my grandson Leo. We walked toward my truck, a beat-up Ford F-150 that had seen more decades than the Sterling family had seen honest days of work. It was a rust bucket to the naked eye, but under the hood was an engine I had rebuilt with parts that could outrun a police interceptor. We were halfway to the truck when the front door of the mansion flew open again. I heard the heavy footsteps of expensive Italian loafers hitting the stone path. It was Brad. For a fleeting second, a foolish, hopeful part of me thought he was coming to apologize. I thought perhaps seeing his father assault his wife had finally located a spine within his soft, pampered body. I should have known better. Brad Sterling did not have a spine. He had a trust fund. Maya, stop right there, Brad shouted, his voice cracking with the petulant rage of a child denied a toy. You are making a scene. You are embarrassing me in front of the catering staff. Do you have any idea how much this dinner cost?" I stopped. I felt Maya flinch against my side. She tried to turn back, her instinct to pacify him kicking in even now after everything. I tightened my grip on her shoulder, keeping her facing forward. "Do not turn around, baby girl," I whispered. "Do not give him the satisfaction of your tears." Brad ran around us, blocking our path to the truck. His face was flushed red, not from shame, but from the wine he had consumed and the indignation of being walked out on. He pointed a manicured finger at Maya, ignoring the red stain that covered her chest, ignoring the terror in his own son's eyes. "You go with him and you stay gone," Brad spat. "You think you can disrespect my father in his own house. You think you can talk back to the man who pays for the roof over your head. If you get in that truck, Maya, I am cutting you off. I am canceling the credit cards. I am locking the joint accounts. You will be on the street with nothing but the clothes on your back and that wine stain." He was panting, his breath visible in the cold air. He looked at me, then really looked at me for the first time that night. His eyes swept over my faded flannel shirt, my calloused hands, my gray hair. He saw a gardener. He saw a charity case. "And you," Brad sneered at me, "you old leech, do not think you are coming back to beg for scraps when she realizes she cannot support herself. I am done subsidizing your pathetic family. Get your junk heap off my driveway before I call the police and have you arrested for trespassing." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had promised to love and cherish my daughter. I saw the fear behind his bluster. He was a small man standing in a large shadow, and tonight that shadow was about to disappear. I did not say a word. I simply stepped around him as if he were a pile of wet leaves on the sidewalk. I opened the passenger door for Maya and helped her up. I lifted Leo into the back seat and buckled him in. I walked around to the driver's side, got in, and turned the key. The engine roared to life, a deep, guttural growl that made Brad take a step back. I put the truck in gear and drove away, leaving my son-in-law screaming threats into the darkness, threats that were already empty, though he did not know it yet. The drive to my house was silent. The only sound was the hum of the tires on the asphalt and Maya's quiet hitching breaths. I watched the headlights cut through the dark Connecticut roads. We passed the gated communities, the private schools, the country clubs. We drove until the streetlights became sparse and the houses became smaller. We drove until we reached the edge of town, where the pavement turned to dirt and the woods grew thick. My house sat at the end of a long, winding road. To anyone passing by, it looked like a shack. The paint was peeling, the porch sagged slightly, and the yard was overgrown with wild blackberry bushes. It was the house of a man who had given up. That was exactly what I wanted them to see. It was camouflage. I parked the truck in the barn around the back. I helped Maya down. She was shivering now, the adrenaline fading, leaving only the cold, damp reality of the wine on her skin. "Come on inside," I said softly. I unlocked the heavy reinforced steel door that was disguised with a layer of rotting wood veneer. We stepped inside, and the world changed. The interior of my home was not a shack. It was a fortress of comfort and technology. The floors were heated, polished concrete. The walls were lined with soundproofing and shelves of first edition books. The kitchen was chef-grade, gleaming with stainless steel and copper. It was a space designed for a man who valued peace, privacy, and quality above all else. A man who had made millions moving freight across the Atlantic and didn't feel the need to buy a yacht to prove it. I led Maya to the large leather sofa and wrapped a cashmere blanket around her shoulders. Leo ran to the corner where I kept his favorite video games, but tonight he just curled up in an armchair watching his mother with wide, fearful eyes. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. My hands were steady, but my mind was traveling back in time. Seeing Preston Sterling tonight, seeing that arrogance, it had unlocked a door in my memory I kept shut for 50 years. I was 25 years old back then. I was driving a rig for a small hauling company. I had just finished a 40-hour haul from Georgia to New York delivering construction materials for a new development project. The developer was a man named Arthur Sterling, Preston's father, Brad's grandfather. I remembered standing in his office, cap in hand, asking for my pay. I had a wife at home, Ruth, who was pregnant with our first child. We had no food in the fridge. I needed that check. Arthur Sterling had looked at me from behind his oak desk, blowing cigar smoke in my face. He told me he was docking my pay because the delivery was an hour late because of a snowstorm. He cut my check in half. He smiled when he did it. He knew I couldn't fight him. He knew I was a black man in a white man's world with no power and no voice. I took the money because I had to feed Ruth. But as I walked out of that office, I made a vow. I vowed that I would never be powerless again. I vowed that one day I would own the men like Arthur Sterling. It took me 50 years, but tonight I had finally collected on that debt. Dad, Maya's voice broke my reverie. She was looking at me, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the dried wine stains. I put the water down on the coffee table and sat next to her. I am here, baby girl. I am here. Dad, I have to divorce him. She sobbed, the words tearing out of her throat. I cannot go back. I cannot let Leo grow up like that. But Dad, he will destroy me. You heard him. He has the money. He has the lawyers. He will take Leo. He will say I am unstable. He will say I cannot provide. He will bury me in court fees until I have nothing left. She buried her face in her hands, her body racking with grief. I am just an architect, Dad. I don't have Sterling money. I don't have their connections. They will crush us. I looked at my daughter. She was so strong, so brilliant, yet she had been conditioned to believe she was small. She had spent 10 years trying to shrink herself to fit into Brad's world, trying to be grateful for the scraps they threw her. She didn't know that the firm she worked for, the one that had just won that $20 million bid, was 40% owned by a holding company I controlled. She didn't know that the house she lived in with Brad, the one he claimed to pay for, was actually secured by a private loan I had authorized through a shell corporation. She thought she was fighting giants with a slingshot. She didn't know her father was the one supplying the stones. I reached out and took her hands, pulling them away from her face. I looked into her eyes that were so much like her mother's. Maya, listen to me, I said, my voice low and rumbling like distant thunder. He is not going to take Leo. He is not going to crush you. You are worried about money. You are worried about lawyers. Do not be. But Dad, you do not understand. She cried, desperate to make me see the danger. Preston knows judges. He plays golf with senators. We are just us. We are Freemans, I said firmly, and that means something. You let me worry about the Sterling money. You let me worry about the lawyers. You just worry about washing that wine off your face and hugging your son. I didn't tell her the extent of my power. Not yet. She was too fragile. If I told her I was worth 10 times what Preston Sterling claimed to be, she wouldn't believe me, or she would be angry that I had hidden it. Tonight she just needed a father, not a tycoon. I stood up to get a wet cloth for her face when the silence of the room was shattered by a ringtone. It was Maya's phone sitting on the coffee table. The screen lit up with a picture of Brad. Maya flinched as if the phone had bitten her. She stared at it, terrified. Answer it, I said. Put it on speaker. She looked at me, hesitating. Dad, I can't. Answer it, Maya. I repeated, my voice hard. Let us hear what the man has to say. She reached out with a trembling hand and tapped the speaker icon. Maya, Brad's voice exploded into the quiet room, distorted by rage and panic. You answer me right now, you witch. What did you do? I didn't do anything, Brad, Maya stammered. We left. We are at my dad's. Don't lie to me, Brad screamed. The caterer just ran my card. The black card, Maya, the one with the unlimited limit. It declined. Do you hear me? It declined. Maya looked at me confused. Brad, that must be a mistake. Maybe the chip is dirty. I tried 3 cards, Maya, Brad yelled. I tried the corporate card. I tried the joint account. They are all dead. The bank says the accounts are frozen. Frozen, Maya. They said there is a lien, a flagged activity report. I leaned back against the kitchen island, crossing my arms over my chest. A small, cold smile touched my lips. Isaiah worked fast. You must have done something, Brad continued, his voice rising to a shriek. You canceled them, didn't you? You called the bank and reported them stolen just to spite me, you petty little... Brad, I didn't... Maya cried. I don't even know the passwords. You never gave them to me. Fix this, Brad roared. You get on the phone and you fix this right now. My father is humiliating me. The guests are whispering. I have a $10,000 bill for the wine alone and I cannot pay it. If you do not fix this in 5 minutes, I am coming over there and I am dragging you back here to wash dishes until the debt is paid. The threat hung in the air, ugly and real. He wanted to make her a servant. He wanted to break her completely. I walked over to the coffee table. I reached down and took the phone from Maya's hand. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with fear, but I touched her shoulder gently, silently, telling her it was okay. I held the phone up to my mouth. I could hear Brad breathing heavily on the other end, muttering curses to himself. "Hello, Brad," I said, my voice calm, flat, emotionless. "Who is this?" Brad snapped. "Elijah." "Put Maya back on. I am done talking to the help." "You are not talking to the help anymore, son," I said. "You are talking to the landlord. You are talking to the bank. You are talking to the man who just turned off the tap." "What are you babbling about, old man?" Brad laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "You are senile. Put my wife on." "Your cards didn't decline because of a glitch, Brad," I said. "They declined because the credit line was revoked. The assets were frozen. The debt has been called in. You don't know what you are talking about." Brad stammered, his confidence faltering. "I know exactly what I am talking about," I said, "because I am the one who made the call. You wanted to teach my daughter respect. You wanted to show her who holds the power. Well, Brad lesson is in session." "You are crazy," Brad hissed. "You are a broke old gardener. You can't do anything." I looked at Maya. She was staring at me, the realization slowly dawning in her eyes. She saw the change in my posture. She heard the authority in my voice. She saw the wolf shedding the sheep's clothing. "You better check your father's accounts too, Brad," I said softly. "Check the business loans. Check the mortgage on that big house you were standing in. Check the title on that Porsche you drove to dinner." There was silence on the line. Dead silence. "You have no idea who you are dealing with, do you?" I continued. "You judged the book by the cover, son. You saw a black man in a flannel shirt and you thought you saw a victim. You didn't look at the author. Elijah, wait." Brad's voice was different now. Smaller. Scared. "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything yet, Brad," I said. "I just turned the lights off. Now we are going to see who can see in the dark." I moved my thumb to the red button. "One more thing, Brad," I said. "Don't come here. Don't come near my daughter. Don't come near my grandson. If you step foot on my property tonight, I won't call the police. I will call the dogs. And these dogs don't bark." "Dad, wait," Brad pleaded. "The game has just begun." "Son," I said. I pressed the button, ending the call. The silence rushed back into the room, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was electric. Maya stared at me, the wine drying on her shirt, her mouth slightly open. "Dad," she whispered, "what did you do?" I looked at her. I looked at the daughter Ruth and I had raised to be kind, to be good, to be everything this world tries to crush. "I just leveled the playing field, Maya," I said, walking back to the kitchen. "Now let's get you cleaned up. We have a busy day tomorrow. We have an empire to dismantle. Black Friday is usually a day for hunting bargains, but for me it was a day for hunting predators." I sat in my kitchen, sipping black coffee from a chipped ceramic mug, watching the sun rise over the frost-covered fields behind my house. It was quiet, a deceptive peace. My grandson Leo was asleep in the guest room, finally resting after crying himself into exhaustion. My daughter Maya sat at the kitchen island staring into a cup of herbal tea, her eyes swollen but dry. She looked like a soldier who had just survived an ambush shell, shocked but alive. I checked my phone. It was 7 in the morning. The markets were opening. The banks were coming online. And in the glass and steel tower of Sterling Developments in downtown Hartford, the guillotine was about to drop. I imagined Preston Sterling walking into his office. I knew his routine better than he knew himself because I had been studying him for months, not as a friend, but as a liability. He would be wearing an Italian suit, probably hungover from the wine he had wasted on my daughter's face. He would be expecting a normal day of bullying subcontractors and juggling loans to keep his house of cards from collapsing. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Isaiah. "The eagle has landed." I didn't smile. This wasn't funny. It was necessary. At that exact moment across town, Preston Sterling was walking past his secretary's desk. Her name was Mrs. Gable, a woman he had underpaid and verbally abused for 20 years. According to Isaiah's report, she was the one who handed him the envelope. It wasn't the usual stack of invoices or sycophantic letters from local politicians. It was a certified letter from the First National Bank. I can picture the scene. Preston slashing the envelope open with a gold letter opener, annoyed by the interruption. He pulls out the letter. He reads the first line. His face goes pale. The bank had sold his debt. Not just a small line of credit. They had sold the entire $50 million commercial loan package that anchored Sterling Developments. They sold the mortgage on the office tower. They sold the construction loans for the new luxury condos by the river. They sold the debt that paid for his Bentley and his country club membership, and they sold it to a private equity firm called Ruth Holdings. Preston wouldn't recognize the name. To him, Ruth was just a common biblical name. He didn't know it was the name of the black woman who used to scrub his father's floors, the woman he had walked past without seeing for years, the woman who died coughing because she couldn't afford a specialist. He didn't know Ruth was the love of my life and the silent partner in my vengeance. The letter would have been concise. Ruth Holdings, having acquired the debt, was exercising its right to immediate recall. Why? Because of a little thing called a moral turpitude clause. Most high-value commercial loans have them. They state that if the principal borrower engages in conduct that brings disrepute or instability to the entity, the lender can demand full repayment immediately. Usually banks look the other way. But Ruth Holdings was not a bank. Ruth Holdings was a hammer. And we had proof. The assault at the dinner table. It wasn't just a family dispute. It was a CEO assaulting the wife of a VP. It was a liability. I took a sip of coffee, picturing Preston reaching for his phone. He would call his banker. He would scream. He would threaten. "Hello, this is Preston Sterling," he would bark. "What is the meaning of this? Who is Ruth Holdings?" And the banker, a man who had likely been looking for an excuse to dump the toxic Sterling debt for months, would reply with polite indifference. "I am sorry, Mr. Sterling, but that is no longer our account. You will have to contact the new note holder." "Who is the representative?" Preston would scream. "The law firm of Isaiah Thomas and Associates." Preston would slam the phone down. He would try to transfer funds from the operating account to cover payroll, but the screen would flash red, frozen. Ruth Holdings had filed an emergency lien. Every asset attached to the Sterling name was now locked down tighter than a drum. I looked at Maya. She was tracing the rim of her cup with a finger. "Dad," she said softly. "Brad called my phone 20 times while I was in the shower. Let him call," I said. "He is just noise, Maya. The real song is playing downtown." "But Dad," Maya hesitated. "The business, the projects. If Preston goes under, Brad loses his job. He loses everything." I looked at her, amazed by the capacity of a woman's heart to worry about the man who held the knife that stabbed her. "He lost everything the moment he laughed at you, Maya," I said. "He just didn't check the receipt yet." Back in the city, the chaos was spreading. Isaiah texted me again. The construction sites. I knew what that meant. At the Riverview condo project, the foreman would be getting a call. "Stop work. The checks bounced. Do not pour the concrete. Send the crews home." A construction site that goes silent is a death knell in this business. Rumors fly faster than light. Suppliers stop delivering. Unions file grievances. It is a domino effect. Within an hour, the reputation of Sterling Developments would be trading at the value of dirt. Preston was likely pacing his office now, watching his empire evaporate. He was drowning, and he didn't even know who had tied the stone to his feet. He thought it was bad luck. He thought it was a misunderstanding. He had no idea it was the husband of the maid he let die. Suddenly, a violent pounding on my front door shattered the morning peace. It wasn't a knock. It was an assault. The wood of the old farmhouse door groaned under the impact. Maya jumped, spilling her tea. Leo ran into the kitchen, his eyes wide with renewed terror. "It is him," Leo whispered. "It is Dad." I stood up slowly, setting my mug down. I didn't rush. I walked to the hallway, passing the mirror where I caught a glimpse of myself. I didn't see a gardener. I saw a man who had moved mountains of steel across oceans. I saw Elijah Freeman. I opened the door. Brad was standing on my porch. He looked like a wreck. His expensive coat was buttoned wrong. His hair was disheveled. He smelled of stale alcohol and fresh rage. He didn't know about the bank yet. He didn't know his inheritance was gone. He was still living in the delusion of last night. "Where is she?" Brad shouted, trying to push past me. I blocked the doorway with my body. It was like hitting a wall of oak. Brad bounced off me, stumbling back onto the porch step. "You are not coming in here, Brad," I said, my voice low and level. "Get out of my way, old man," Brad spat. "I am here for my wife. She has chores to do. She left the dinner without cleaning up. Do you know how embarrassing that was?" My father was furious. "She needs to come back and apologize. She needs to finish serving the guests." I stared at him. The sheer audacity of it took my breath away for a moment. He didn't want her back because he loved her. He didn't want her back to apologize for his father throwing wine in her face. He wanted her back to serve, to clean, to be the help, to... He saw a black woman and he saw a servant. Even if that woman was his wife, even if she was an award-winning architect, in his mind, she was property. You want her to serve? I asked quietly. Yes, serve. Brad yelled, his face twisting with entitlement. That is her job. She is my wife. She humiliates me by running away to this hovel. Tell her to get her ass out here right now. We have a brunch to attend at the club and she needs to change her clothes. That red stain looks ridiculous. I stepped out onto the porch and closed the door behind me. I wanted to keep the toxicity outside, away from Leo. Brad, I said, stepping closer to him until I could smell the fear beneath the whiskey. You are done giving orders. Who are you to tell me what to do? Brad sneered, poking a finger at my chest. You are a nobody. A broke gardener living in a shack. I could buy this property with the cash in my wallet and turn it into a parking lot. I looked at his finger on my chest. I looked at his eyes. Your wallet is empty, Brad, I said. What are you talking about? Your card was declined last night because the money is gone, I said simply. All of it? The trust fund, the joint accounts, the credit lines, it is all gone. You are lying. Brad laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. You are senile. That was a bank error. I'm going to call them this morning and have someone fired. Call them, I challenged him. Call them right now. Brad glared at me and pulled out his phone. He dialed the private client services number for the bank. He put it on speaker, wanting to humiliate me, wanting to prove his power. Mr. Sterling, the automated voice said, please hold for an agent. See? Brad smirked. VIP service. A human voice came on the line. Mr. Sterling, this is the fraud department. See? Brad said to me. Fraud. I told you. Someone hacked my account. He spoke into the phone. Yes, this is Brad Sterling. Unlock my cards immediately. I have a brunch to get to. Mr. Sterling, the agent said, her voice cold and professional. Your accounts have not been hacked. They have been frozen pursuant to a court order attached to the lien on Sterling Developments. What lien? Brad shouted. The lien held by Ruth Holdings, sir. The primary creditor has called in the debt. All assets associated with the Sterling estate, including personal accounts guaranteed by the business, are frozen pending liquidation. Liquidation. Brad dropped the hand holding the phone. It hung by his side. The agent's voice still tinny and small coming from the speaker. Ruth Holdings, Brad whispered, looking at me. Who is Ruth Holdings? I took a step forward, forcing him down another step. The morning sun hit my face, but Brad was standing in my shadow. Ruth was my wife, I said. Brad blinked, confusion warring with panic. Your wife. The maid. The woman your family let die, I corrected him. And Ruth Holdings is the company that owns you now. You bought the debt, Brad stammered, backing away toward his Porsche. That is impossible. You are poor. You grow vegetables. I grow assets. Brad, I said, relentlessly closing the distance. I grow capital. And unlike your father, I don't inherit power. I build it. Brad hit the door of his car. He looked trapped. The arrogance was draining out of him, replaced by the terrified realization of a child who has lost his parent in a crowd. This is a joke, he said, his voice shaking. This is some sick joke. My dad will fix this. He will destroy you. Your dad is currently trying to figure out why his key card doesn't work at the office elevator, I said, checking my watch. Isaiah was thorough. Go home, Brad, I said. Go to that big house that doesn't belong to you anymore. Tell your father that Elijah Freeman sends his regards. And tell him that the interest on the debt has just compounded. Brad scrambled into his car, fumbling with the keys. He started the engine and reversed violently, spraying gravel, tearing up the grass I had carefully tended. He sped away, driving like a man running from a ghost. I watched him go. He was rushing back to a burning castle, hoping to find water but finding only gasoline. I turned back to the house. Maya was standing in the window watching. She had heard everything. I opened the door. He didn't know, did he? Maya asked softly. He didn't know they were broke. They have been broke for years, Maya, I said, walking to the kitchen to refill my coffee. They were living on leverage and arrogance. I just pulled the pin. But Ruth Holdings? Maya asked. Mom? I looked at the photo of Ruth on the mantelpiece. She was smiling, young and tired, but full of hope. She never got to live in this house, I said. She never got to see you win that award. But she is seeing this, Maya. She is seeing us take back our dignity. The phone rang again. It wasn't Brad. It wasn't Preston. It was Isaiah. Sir Isaiah said, "Preston is in the lobby of the bank. He is screaming. He is demanding to see the owner of Ruth Holdings." "Let him scream," I said. "He is threatening to call the police," Isaiah added. "He says it is a hostile takeover based on fraud." "Let him call," I said calmly. "We have the contract. We have the video of the assault. We have the moral clause. It is ironclad." "What is the next move, sir?" I looked at Leo, who was now sitting at the table eating cereal, trying to pretend the world wasn't ending. "Serve the papers, Isaiah," I said. "Serve them at the office, and serve Brad at the mansion. I want the eviction notice posted on the front door before noon." "Yes, sir." I hung up. The empire was crumbling. The phantom wealth was evaporating in the morning light. But the war wasn't over. A cornered rat is dangerous, and Preston Sterling was about to realize he was in a cage of his own making. I sat down next to Maya. "Eat your breakfast, baby girl," I said. "You are going to need your strength." "Why, Dad?" she asked. "Because Brad will be back," I said. "And this time he won't be alone, and he won't be asking for you to serve dinner. He will be begging for his life, and you need to be strong enough to say no." The silence in the farmhouse didn't last long. It was shattered not by a knock, but by the sound of breaking glass. Brad had circled back. He hadn't gone home to his father. He had let his rage boil over in the cab of his Porsche until he convinced himself that he was the victim, that he was the king coming to reclaim his property. He had kicked in the side window of the porch door and reached through to unlock the deadbolt. I heard Maya scream from the living room. It was a sound that scraped against the bottom of my soul, a sound that took me back to nights I tried to forget, nights when Ruth would cry because we didn't have enough coal to heat the apartment. I walked into the hallway. Brad was there. He had grabbed Maya by the wrist, twisting her arm behind her back, forcing her toward the door. She was struggling, her boots skidding on the polished concrete, but he was younger and fueled by the hysterical strength of a man losing control. "You are coming with me," Brad snarled, his face twisted into an ugly mask. "You are going to fix this. You are going to tell the bank it was a mistake. You are going to tell my father you lied." "Let me go," Maya cried, thrashing against him. "You are hurting me." Leo ran into the room holding a plastic toy sword ready to defend his mother. Brad shoved the boy aside with his free hand, sending my grandson sprawling onto the floor. That was the moment the last thread of my patience snapped. I reached behind the coat rack near the door. My hand closed around the familiar taped handle of a Louisville Slugger baseball bat. It wasn't just a piece of sports equipment. I had carried this piece of ash wood in the trunk of my car during the union strikes in the 80s. It had protected me when strikebreakers tried to run my trucks off the road. It was heavy. It was scarred. It was ready. I stepped into the light. "Let her go, Brad," I said. Brad looked up. He saw the bat. He laughed a manic, high-pitched sound. "What are you going to do, old man?" he sneered. "Hit me. You will go to jail for assault. I will own this shack. I will sue you for everything you—" I didn't wait for him to finish. I swung, not at his head. I am not a murderer. I swung at the doorframe right next to his ear. The wood splintered with a crack like a gunshot. Dust and splinters sprayed over his expensive coat. "The next one breaks your knee," I said. "Let my daughter go." Brad froze. He looked at the dent in the wood. He looked at my eyes. He realized that the distance between the doorframe and his kneecap was a distance I could close in a heartbeat. He shoved Maya away from him. She stumbled back, falling onto the sofa, pulling Leo into her arms. "You are crazy!" Brad shouted, backing up toward the open door. "You are a violent psychopath. I am calling the police. I am having you arrested." "You don't need to call them," I said, resting the bat on my shoulder. "I already did." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. Blue and red lights flashed through the trees, illuminating the front yard in a chaotic strobe. 2 cruisers skidded to a halt on the gravel. Brad smiled. It was the smile of a man who thinks the system is built for him. "Officer," he yelled, running out onto the porch, waving his arms. "Officer, arrest him. He has a weapon. He assaulted me. He kidnapped my wife and son." 2 deputies stepped out of the cars. I knew them, Sheriff Miller and Deputy Higgins. I had donated the funds for their new K9 unit last year through an anonymous grant, but I had also fixed Miller's lawnmower 2 summers ago, just as neighborly Elijah. "Drop the bat, mister. Drop the keys." Freeman Sheriff Miller said calmly, his hand resting on his holster but not drawing the weapon. I leaned the bat against the wall and stepped out onto the porch, my hands visible. "He tried to force my daughter out of the house, Sheriff," I said. "He shoved my grandson." "Lies!" Brad screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "He is lying. Look at him. Look at where he lives. Who are you going to believe? I am Preston Sterling's son." Sheriff Miller looked at Brad. He looked at the Porsche parked haphazardly on the grass. He looked at the terror in Maya's eyes through the open door. "Mr. Sterling," the sheriff said, walking up the steps, "you need to be quiet." "I want to press charges," Brad insisted. "I want him in handcuffs." Sheriff Miller reached into his vest pocket. He didn't pull out handcuffs. He pulled out a folded document. "Mr. Bradley Sterling," he said formally, "I am serving you with an emergency temporary restraining order granted by Judge Patterson 20 minutes ago." Brad stopped breathing. His mouth hung open. "A restraining order," he whispered. "On me. You are to stay 500 feet away from Maya Freeman Sterling." "Leo Sterling and Elijah Freeman," the sheriff recited. "You are to have no contact, electronic or otherwise. You are to vacate the premises immediately." "This is insane," Brad stammered. "A judge wouldn't sign that on a holiday weekend." How?" A black town car pulled into the driveway, gliding silently past the police cruisers. The back door opened and Isaiah stepped out. He was wearing a black wool coat over a charcoal suit, looking like the Grim Reaper of Wall Street. He carried a leather briefcase. "Mr. Sterling." Isaiah said, his voice smooth and sharp as a scalpel. "Judge Patterson is an old friend of the firm. He takes domestic violence allegations very seriously, especially when they are corroborated by video evidence of a father-in-law throwing wine at a woman's face." "Who are you?" Brad asked, looking from the sheriff to the man in the suit. "My name is Isaiah Thomas," Isaiah said, walking up the steps. "I am Mr. Freeman's attorney." Brad looked at me, then back at Isaiah. He started to laugh again, a broken, hysterical sound. "You have an attorney?" he scoffed, looking at my flannel shirt. "This guy. What did you do, Elijah, sell your tractor to pay for an hour of his time?" Isaiah ignored him. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope. "I am also here to serve you with divorce papers," Isaiah said, handing the envelope to Brad. "Mrs. Sterling is filing for divorce on the grounds of cruelty and irreconcilable differences. She is seeking full physical custody of the minor child, Leo." Brad slapped the papers out of Isaiah's hand. They scattered on the porch floor, fluttering in the cold wind. "I am not signing that," Brad shouted. "You want a divorce, Maya? Fine. But you get nothing. Do you hear me? You get nothing. I have the money. I have the house. I have the lawyers. You are just a gold digger who trapped me, and now you are going back to the gutter where you belong." I stepped forward, my boots crunching on the divorce papers. "Gold digger," I repeated quietly. "Yes," Brad spat. "That is all she is. That is all you people are. Leeches. She married me for the lifestyle. She married me for the Sterling name. Well, guess what? The ride is over. I am kicking her out of my house. I am locking the doors. She can sleep in this shack with you." Isaiah chuckled. It was a dry, dusty sound. "Mr. Sterling," Isaiah said, picking up a specific document from the scattered pile. "I think there is a fundamental misunderstanding here regarding the concept of ownership." "What are you talking about?" Brad snapped. "The house," Isaiah said. "The estate at 42 Oak Creek Drive. You believe you own it, correct?" "My father bought that house for us," Brad said, puffing out his chest. "It is in my name." Isaiah adjusted his glasses. "Actually, Mr. Sterling, the deed is held by a trust, the Sterling Family Trust, correct?" "Exactly," Brad said. "My money." And that trust, Isaiah continued, funded the purchase of the property through a private interest-only loan secured by a third-party guarantor. Brad blinked. He didn't understand finance. He only understood spending. "So what?" So Isaiah said, enjoying this too much. "The guarantor of that loan, the entity that put up the collateral to allow a man with your credit score and gambling debts to live in a $3 million mansion, was a company called Janus Capital. I don't care about the bank details," Brad said, waving his hand dismissively. "You should," Isaiah said. "Because Janus Capital is a subsidiary of Freeman Logistics." Brad froze. He looked at me. "Freeman Logistics. Elijah, Freeman is the sole proprietor of Janus Capital," Isaiah said, pointing at me. Your father didn't buy that house, Brad. He couldn't get a loan. His credit was shot 5 years ago. He came to a private lender. He came to Janus. Mr. Freeman approved the loan because he wanted his daughter to have a safe home. He has been acting as the anonymous guarantor for your mortgage for 10 years. I watched the realization hit Brad like a physical blow. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking gray and sickly in the porch light. No, Brad whispered. That is a lie. My dad said. Your dad lied to you, Isaiah said, just like he lied to his shareholders. But here is the unfortunate part for you, Mr. Sterling. Since you have violated the terms of the moral clause in the lending agreement, and since you have threatened the physical safety of the guarantor's daughter, Mr. Freeman has decided to withdraw his guarantee. Isaiah pulled out another paper, a red notice. This is a notice of default, Isaiah said. Without the guarantor, the loan is called in immediately. Since the trust has no liquidity to pay the principal of $3 million, the property is currently in foreclosure. Foreclosure, Brad gasped. As of 10 minutes ago, Isaiah said, checking his watch. Which means, Mr. Sterling, you are trespassing. Not just here, but there. You don't have a home to go back to. You don't have a bed to sleep in. The locks are being changed as we speak. Brad looked at me, his eyes wide with a terror that was absolute. He looked at the shack he had mocked. He looked at the man he had called a leech. You own my house, he whispered. I own the debt, Brad, I corrected him. And the debt is due. Sheriff Miller stepped forward. Mr. Sterling, I think it is time for you to leave. If you violate this restraining order or if you attempt to enter the property at Oak Creek Drive, I will arrest you. Do you understand? Brad didn't answer. He looked at Maya, who was standing in the doorway holding Leo. She wasn't crying anymore. She was looking at him with a mixture of pity and revulsion. You played me, Brad whispered to her. You knew. You all knew. I didn't know anything. Brad, Maya said, her voice strong. I thought you were a man. I was the one who was fooled. Brad turned and stumbled down the stairs. He walked like a man who had forgotten how to use his legs. He got into his Porsche. The engine started with a roar, but it sounded hollow now. A toy car for a boy who had lost his playground. He backed out slowly this time. No gravel spray, no aggressive revving. He drove away into the dark, a king in exile with nowhere to go. I watched the taillights disappear. I felt the weight of the bat still leaning against the wall. Isaiah looked at me. That went well, sir. It is not over, Isaiah, I said, looking at the dark road. Preston hasn't played his hand yet. Preston is currently trying to liquidate assets that don't exist, Isaiah said. But you are right. He will come for you. Let him come, I said. I will be waiting. I turned to Maya. She was looking at me with a question in her eyes that I had been dreading for years. Dad, she said softly, you own his company. You own my house. Who are you? I walked over to her and kissed her forehead. I am just a father who learned to save his pennies, Maya, I said. Come on, let's go downstairs. There is something I need to show you. I led her to the heavy oak door at the back of the hallway, the one she thought was a closet. I pulled a key from around my neck. It is time you knew the truth about your mother, I said. And it is time you knew why I have spent 40 years preparing for a war I hoped I would never have to fight. I unlocked the door and the smell of old paper and ozone drifted up from the darkness. Welcome to the war room. Baby girl, I whispered. Step inside. The silence in the farmhouse was heavy and thick, like the air before a thunderstorm breaks. The police lights had faded into the distance, and the roar of Brad's Porsche was just a memory, but the energy in the room was still vibrating. My daughter Maya sat on the edge of the leather sofa, her hands trembling as she held a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. Leo was asleep upstairs, finally succumbing to the exhaustion of a night that had shattered his childhood. I watched Maya from the kitchen doorway. She looked so small, wrapped in that cashmere blanket, her eyes fixed on a spot on the floor. She was trying to reassemble the pieces of her reality, but none of the edges fit anymore. She had walked into this house thinking her father was a poor gardener living on a pension and her husband was a wealthy prince. Now she knew her husband was a pauper in a stolen castle, and her father was the man holding the keys to the kingdom. Dad, she whispered, her voice cracking. How? I walked over and sat on the coffee table facing her. How what, baby girl? Isaiah, she said, looking up at me. That lawyer. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my first car. He commanded the sheriff like a general commands a private. You are a retired truck driver, Dad. You grow tomatoes. How do you have a lawyer like that on speed dial? I took a deep breath. I had practiced this conversation in the mirror 1,000 times over the last 30 years. I always thought I would have more time. I thought I would tell her when I was on my deathbed, leaving her an empire she didn't have to build. But life rarely follows the schedule we write for it. I am not just a truck driver, Maya, I said softly. I was never just a driver. Then who are you? She asked, a tear slipping down her cheek. Because tonight you destroyed my husband's life with a phone call. You own his debt. You own his house. I don't understand. I stood up and held out my hand. Come with me, I said. She hesitated for a second, looking at my rough, calloused hand. It was the same hand that used to push her on the swing set, the same hand that wiped her tears when she scraped her knee. She took it. I led her down the hallway to the heavy oak door beneath the staircase. For years, Maya had thought this was just a storage closet for my winter coats and old tools. It was always locked. I pulled the brass key from the chain around my neck, the metal warm against my skin. I unlocked the deadbolt with a heavy click. I opened the door, and the smell hit us. It wasn't the smell of mothballs or dust. It was the smell of ozone, old paper, and expensive cigars. I flipped the switch. A soft hum filled the air as the ventilation system kicked in. We walked down a flight of concrete stairs lined with motion sensor lights that flickered on as we descended. At the bottom, the room opened up into a space larger than the footprint of the house above. Maya gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. The basement was not a basement. It was a command center. One wall was covered in screens displaying real-time shipping routes, global stock market tickers, and news feeds from 3 different continents. In the center of the room stood a massive desk made of reclaimed wood covered in stacks of files and a secure satellite phone. But it wasn't the technology that caught Maya's eye. It was the wall to her right. It was a gallery of my life, a life she had never seen. There were framed photographs hanging in precise rows. In one, a younger version of me in a sharp tuxedo was shaking hands with President Reagan in the Oval Office. In another, I was standing on the deck of a massive cargo ship cutting a ribbon alongside the governor of New York. There were patents framed in glass diagrams of complex logistics, algorithms, and automated sorting systems that revolutionized the shipping industry in the 90s. Dad, Maya whispered, walking toward the wall. Is that you with the president? I stood beside her looking at the photo. That was 1987, I said. I had just secured the contract to handle the logistics for the Defense Department's supply chain on the East Coast. They needed someone who knew the roads better than the maps did. They needed someone who could move things without being seen. You invented the Freeman algorithm, she said, reading one of the patents. We studied this in my business elective in college. They said it was developed by a think tank. It was developed by a man driving 18 hours a day with a notebook on his steering wheel, I corrected her. I saw the inefficiencies, Maya. I saw how time was wasted, so I fixed it. And then I patented it. And then I leased it to every major shipping company in the world. She turned to me, her eyes wide with shock and confusion. You are rich, she said. Not just comfortable. You are wealthy. I nodded. Yes. Then why, she asked, her voice rising in anger. Why did we live in that apartment in the projects? Why did you let me take out student loans? Why do you drive that truck? Why did you let Mom? She stopped. The word hung in the air. Mom. I walked over to the far wall. This wall was different. It wasn't a celebration of success. It was a monument to a war. The entire wall was covered in corkboard. Pinned to it were hundreds of documents, photos, and newspaper clippings. They were connected by red string, creating a web of corruption and deceit. At the center of the web was a photograph of a man, Arthur Sterling, Preston's father, and surrounding him were photos of Preston Brad and the entire Sterling empire. This wall detailed 30 years of tax evasion, safety violations, bribes paid to zoning inspectors, and lawsuits settled out of court. It was a map of the rot that held up the Sterling name. Maya walked over to it. She saw her husband's name on a bank statement showing gambling debts. She saw Preston's name on a foreclosure notice from 10 years ago. She saw the truth. This is why I lived like a pauper, Maya, I said, my voice hard. Because wealth makes you a target, but invisibility makes you dangerous. She pointed to a photo in the center of the web. It was a picture of her mother, Ruth. She was young, beautiful, and tired, wearing a maid's uniform, standing in front of the Sterling mansion, the same mansion we had just fled. You asked about your mother, I said, feeling the old wound open up in my chest. You asked why I let her work herself to death. Maya nodded, tears streaming down her face. You told me she got sick. You told me it was just nature. I lied, I said. I walked over and touched the photo of Ruth. My fingers trembled slightly. Your mother didn't just get sick, Maya. She was murdered. Not with a gun or a knife, but with indifference. I turned to face my daughter. I wanted her to hear this. I wanted her to understand the fire that had been burning inside me for 4 decades. 40 years ago, your mother worked for Arthur Sterling, Preston's father. She was the head housekeeper. She ran that house. She raised Preston because Arthur was too busy drinking and his wife was too busy spending money. Ruth loved that family. She thought they cared about her. One winter, we had a bad flu season. It turned into pneumonia. Ruth was sick. So sick she could barely stand. But Arthur was hosting a Christmas party for the senator. He needed the house perfect. He told Ruth if she didn't come in, she was fired. We needed the money, Maya. I was just starting out with 1 truck. We had no savings. So she went. I paused, swallowing the lump in my throat. She worked a 14-hour shift with a fever of 103. She scrubbed their floors. She polished their silver. And at the end of the night, she collapsed in the kitchen. Maya covered her mouth with her hand, a sob escaping her lips. Do you know what Arthur Sterling did? I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. He didn't call an ambulance. He didn't call me. He told his driver to put her in the back of the car and dump her at the bus stop because he didn't want a sick maid dying in his kitchen and upsetting the guests. Maya gasped. No. Yes, I said. I found her there 3 hours later. She was freezing. She was blue. I took her to the hospital, but we didn't have insurance. The doctors needed $50 for the antibiotics. Just $50. I didn't have it. I went back to the Sterling mansion. I banged on the door. I begged Arthur for my pay. I begged him for a loan. I looked at the photo of Arthur Sterling, a man who looked so much like Preston. He laughed at me, Maya. He said, if you can't afford to keep your wife alive, that is God's way of telling you you shouldn't have a wife. And he closed the door. Ruth died that morning. I said the words tasting like ash. She died because of $50. She died because to them she wasn't a human being. She was an appliance that had broken down. I turned back to the wall of evidence. That day I made a vow. I swore I wouldn't just survive. I swore I would become the thing they feared most. I would become the bank. I worked 20 hours a day. I took risks no one else would take. I built this empire in the shadows using shell companies and proxies so they would never see me coming. I looked at Maya. I bought their debt, Maya, piece by piece over 30 years. Every time they overextended, every time they needed a bailout, I was there in the shadows buying the paper. Ruth Holdings isn't just a company. It is a sword. Maya looked at the wall at the sheer scale of my obsession. You didn't just want to protect me, she whispered. You wanted to destroy them. Protecting you was the goal, I said, but destroying them, that is the justice. They killed my wife, Maya, and tonight when Preston threw that wine in your face, when he treated you like dirt, he showed me that nothing has changed. The rot is in the blood. They think they are untouchable. I walked over to the desk and picked up a file. It was thick, heavy, with the weight of impending doom. This isn't just about a foreclosure, Maya, I said, handing her the file. This is the kill shot. This file contains evidence of embezzlement, fraud, and safety violations that Preston has been hiding for a decade. I have been saving it, waiting for the right moment. Maya opened the file. She saw the numbers. She saw the emails. You are going to send them to prison, she asked, looking up at me. I am going to wipe the name Sterling off the map, I said. I am going to take every brick of that mansion, every dollar in their accounts, and I am going to build a hospital wing in your mother's name. I am going to make sure that no one ever dies for $50 again. But what about Brad, she asked. He is Leo's father. I looked at her. I saw the conflict in her eyes. Brad made his choice, I said. He chose his father over his wife. He chose cruelty over kindness. He is a casualty of war, Maya, and I will not let him drag you down with him. I took her shoulders in my hands. You asked me who I am. I am Elijah Freeman. I am the man who waited 40 years for the check to clear, and tomorrow morning I am going to cash it. Maya looked at me. She looked at the wall. She looked at the photo of the mother she barely remembered, and then she looked back at me. Her eyes were dry now. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold steel resolve that made her look exactly like Ruth. "Okay, Dad," she said, closing the file. "Do it." I smiled. It was a grim smile, but it was the first time I had felt truly close to my daughter in years. "Go upstairs and sleep," I said. "Tomorrow, we go to war." As she walked up the stairs, I turned back to the wall. I looked at Arthur Sterling's face. Almost there, I whispered to the ghost of my enemy. Almost there. I did not need to be in the room to see the sweat beading on Preston Sterling's forehead. I knew the man. I knew his vanity. And I knew that nothing terrified a man like Preston more than the silence of a telephone that used to ring nonstop. It was 10 o'clock in the morning on Black Friday. The markets were churning, but the trading floor at Sterling Developments was a graveyard. The phones were dead because the lines had been cut. The computers were dark because the servers had been seized. Preston sat in his corner office, surrounded by awards he had bought and accolades he had stolen, staring at a single piece of paper on his mahogany desk. It was the notification of debt assignment. The bank had washed its hands of him. They had sold his toxicity to the highest bidder, and that bidder was Ruth Holdings. I sat in my basement command center watching the GPS tracker on Preston's phone. He was pacing. I could imagine him loosening his silk tie, pouring a glass of scotch at 10 in the morning, trying to steady hands that were shaking with a mixture of rage and withdrawal. He finally picked up his personal cell phone, the only line that hadn't been disconnected yet. He dialed the number listed on the letterhead. The call routed to a burner phone sitting on the desk in front of me, but I didn't answer it. I let it ring. I let him sweat. I let him leave a voicemail. Then I forwarded the number to Isaiah. Isaiah was waiting in a rented conference room in a high-rise building 3 blocks away. We didn't use my office. We didn't use Isaiah's main firm. We rented a sterile, glass-walled box that looked like every other corporate Shark Tank in the city. It was neutral ground. It was a trap. I put on my headset and tapped into the audio feed from the bug Isaiah had placed in his lapel. I wanted to hear every breath. Preston arrived 12 minutes late. It was a power move, a pathetic attempt to show he was still in control of his time. He burst into the conference room, not walking but marching, his chin jutting out, his eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses that he didn't remove. He looked like a man trying to hold onto a hurricane with his bare hands. "Who are you?" Preston barked, not bothering to sit down. "I want to see the principal. I want to speak to Ruth." Isaiah sat at the head of the table, calm as a frozen lake. He didn't stand up. He didn't offer a hand. He simply gestured to the empty chair opposite him. "Please sit down, Mr. Sterling." Isaiah said, his voice filtered through the digital feed but losing none of its edge. "My principal is a silent partner. I speak for Ruth Holdings. And right now I am the only person in this city willing to speak to you at all." Preston scoffed, but he sat. He threw his leather portfolio onto the table with a loud slap. "This is a mistake," Preston said, leaning forward, his voice dropping to that conspiratorial tone he used when he was trying to cheat a contractor. The bank panicked. "I have a liquidity issue. Sure, everyone does. The market is tight, but my assets are solid. The Riverview project is 70% complete. The projected returns are massive. The Riverview project has been issued a stop work order," Isaiah corrected him, shuffling a single paper. "The concrete supplier has filed a lien. The electricians walked off the job an hour ago. You don't have a project, Mr. Sterling. You have a hole in the ground and a lot of angry unions." Preston waved his hand dismissively as if swatting away a fly. "Details. Minor setbacks. Look, I know how this game is played. You bought the debt for pennies on the dollar. You are looking for a quick flip. You want a payout. Fine, I will play." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook. It was a theatrical gesture. We both knew the account attached to that book was empty. "I will write you a personal check right now for 10% of the principal," Preston said, his eyes locked on Isaiah. "A good faith payment. We restructure the loan. You give me 6 months to finish the condos. I pay you back with interest. Everyone wins." Isaiah didn't even look at the checkbook. "We are not interested in restructuring," Isaiah said. Preston blinked. His smile faltered. "Okay, 15%. And I will cut you in on the back end. Equity points. Pure profit. Under the table if you prefer. We can call it a consulting fee." I listened to the bribe roll off his tongue so easily. It was muscle memory for him. He had bribed zoning inspectors, city councilmen, and safety regulators his entire life. He thought every man had a price tag. He didn't realize he was trying to bribe the executioner. "Mr. Sterling," Isaiah said, leaning back. You seem to be under the impression that this is a negotiation. It is not. We are not a hedge fund looking for a quarterly bonus. We are a liquidation firm. Liquidation, Preston whispered, the color draining from his face. We have reviewed your financials, Isaiah continued relentlessly. You are leveraged at 400%. You have borrowed against assets you don't own. You have moved funds from the employee pension plan to cover your personal gambling debts. That is a lie, Preston shouted, slamming his fist on the table. Who told you that? The math told us, Isaiah said, and the math says you are insolvent. Therefore, pursuant to the terms of the acquisition, Ruth Holdings is exercising its right to seize all collateral immediately. Preston stood up, knocking his chair over. You can't do that. I have rights. I know senators. I play golf with the mayor. I will have your license. I will bury you in litigation for 20 years. Isaiah stood up too. He was younger, taller, and infinitely more composed. The mayor is currently holding a press conference, distancing himself from your company, Isaiah said, checking his watch. And as for litigation, you are welcome to try. But lawyers cost money, Mr. Sterling. And as of 9 a.m. this morning, you don't have any. Preston looked around the room, looking for an exit, looking for a weapon, looking for anything to save him. He was a rat in a maze, and he had just hit the wall. What do you want? Preston hissed. Just tell me what you want. Isaiah looked him dead in the eye. I leaned forward in my chair in the basement, holding my breath. This was it. My employer wants the collateral, Isaiah said clearly. All of it. The commercial properties, the undeveloped land, the fleet vehicles, and the personal assets guaranteed by the Sterling Trust. What personal assets? Preston asked, his voice trembling. The estate at 42 Oak Creek Drive, Isaiah said. The mansion. We want the keys, Mr. Sterling. By 5 p.m. today. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a man. I heard Preston's breath hitch. The mansion wasn't just a house. It was his identity. It was the physical manifestation of the lie he had lived for 40 years. Losing the business was one thing. Losing the manor was a public castration. You want my home, Preston whispered. It is not your home, Isaiah said, collecting his papers. It is our asset, and we are taking possession. Preston lunged. I heard the scuffle through the headset. He tried to grab Isaiah. He tried to physically attack the messenger because he couldn't handle the message. But Preston was an old man softened by luxury, and Isaiah was young and fit. I heard a thud as Preston hit the floor, shoved back by a firm hand. Touch me again, Mr. Sterling, Isaiah said, his voice ice cold, and I will add assault charges to the fraud indictment that the district attorney is currently drafting. Indictment. Preston wheezed from the floor. Isaiah walked to the door. Get out of the building, Mr. Sterling. Go home. Pack your bags. You have 7 hours. The feed went dead as Isaiah left the room. I took off the headset. My hands were shaking not with fear but with the adrenaline of a hunt concluded. I looked at the photo of Ruth on the wall. We got him, baby, I whispered. We got the house. But the ripple effect was just beginning. An hour later, my surveillance system picked up Preston's car screeching into the driveway of the Sterling estate. He didn't park. He slammed the car into the antique fountain in the center of the circular drive, cracking the stone. He stumbled out of the car, leaving the door open. He stormed into the house like a tornado. I didn't have cameras inside the mansion, but I didn't need them. I knew what was happening. He was destroying the set of his own play. He found his wife Linda in the solarium arranging flowers, oblivious to the fact that her world had ended. He screamed at her. He overturned the table, sending vases shattering against the marble floor. He blamed her for his spending. He blamed the economy. He blamed the government. He blamed everyone but himself. Then Brad walked in. My son-in-law had been hiding in his room since he fled my farm, nursing his bruised ego and waiting for his daddy to fix everything. He walked down the grand staircase, hearing the commotion, expecting to see his father handling a servant. Instead, he saw his father destroying the furniture. Dad, Brad asked, his voice small. What is happening? Preston turned on his son. He saw Brad and he saw his own failure reflected back at him. It is over, Preston roared, grabbing a Ming vase and hurling it at the wall. It is all gone. The bastards took it all. Who took it? Brad asked, terrified. Ruth Holdings. Preston screamed. They bought the debt. They are taking the house, Brad. They are kicking us out. Tonight. Brad froze. The name hit him like a physical blow. Ruth Holdings. He remembered what I had said on the porch. Ruth was my wife. He realized then, with a sickening lurch in his stomach, that the nightmare wasn't a bank error. It wasn't a glitch. It was me. He didn't tell his father. He was too much of a coward to admit that he had provoked the man who was now destroying them. Instead, panic set in. Absolute self-preserving panic. He realized his trust fund was gone. His inheritance was smoke. His lifestyle was dead. He needed a lifeboat. And in his twisted, selfish mind, he thought of the only person who had ever cleaned up his messes. He thought of Maya. He didn't think of her as a wife. He thought of her as an asset he had discarded too soon. She had a job. She had a salary. She had a father who apparently had secret money. He needed to get back in her good graces. He needed to secure his position. I watched from my kitchen as Maya's phone lit up on the counter. It was Brad. Maya looked at it. She looked at me. "Answer it," I said. "Put it on speaker. Let him beg." She picked it up. Her hand was steady now. She pressed the button. Maya, Brad's voice came through, breathless and frantic. "Baby, are you there?" "I am here, Brad," Maya said, her voice cool. "Listen, I am so sorry about last night." Brad gushed, the words tumbling out over each other. "I was drunk. I was stressed. Dad put so much pressure on me. I didn't mean what I said." "I love you, Maya. You know I love you." I listened to him lie. It was a masterclass in manipulation. He wasn't apologizing because he was sorry. He was apologizing because he was drowning. "We need to talk," Brad continued. "I am coming to pick you up. We can go to a hotel, just you and me and Leo. We can fix this. I will make it up to you. I promise." He didn't mention the bankruptcy. He didn't mention the foreclosure. He was trying to trap her back into his web before she found out he was destitute. He wanted to use her credit to book the hotel. He wanted to use her as a shield against the coming storm. Maya looked at me. She saw the truth in my eyes. She saw the pathetic reality of the man she had married. "Brad," she said, cutting him off. "Yes, baby," Brad said, hope creeping into his voice. "Are you calling me because you love me?" Maya asked. "Or are you calling me because your father just told you that you are homeless?" There was a silence on the line, a long, heavy silence where the truth hung naked and shivering. "How do you know that?" Brad whispered. "Because my father told me," Maya said. "Your father?" Brad's voice turned venomous again, the mask slipping. "That old bastard. He did this. He ruined us. You have to stop him, Maya. You have to tell him to call off the dogs." "I am not stopping anything," Maya said. "Maya, please," Brad begged, his voice cracking. "I have nowhere to go. They are taking the car. They are locking the gates. I have no cash." "Then you better start walking," Maya said. "It is a long way to the bottom." She hung up the phone. She placed it face down on the counter. She didn't cry. She took a deep breath and looked at me. "He didn't even ask about Leo," she said softly. "No," I said, "he didn't." Maya walked over to the window and looked out at the winter landscape. "Let them fall, Dad," she said. "Let them all fall." I stood up and put my hand on her shoulder. "They are falling, baby girl," I said. "But we are not done yet. Preston is cornered. And a cornered animal bites. We need to be ready for the final lunge." I checked the time. It was noon. The eviction notice would be served in 5 hours. The sun was high, but for the Sterlings the long night had just begun, and I intended to be the one to turn out the lights. The peace of the farmhouse was shattered not by a brick through the window, but by the silent ping of a notification on Maya's phone. We were in the kitchen making lunch, trying to establish a new normal. Leo was helping me slice carrots, his small hands moving carefully with the knife. For a few hours I had let myself believe that the worst was over, that the eviction notice and the frozen accounts were enough to keep the wolves at bay. I was wrong. A cornered wolf doesn't just bite, it howls. Maya picked up her phone. Her face went gray. She didn't say a word. She just handed the device to me, her hand trembling so violently she almost dropped it. I took the phone. On the screen was a video. It was Brad. He was sitting in what looked like a hotel room, the lighting dim, his eyes red and puffy. He looked broken. It was a masterclass in manipulation. "Hey everyone," Brad said into the camera, his voice cracking. "I didn't want to do this. I wanted to keep this private, but I don't know where else to turn. My wife, Maya, she took my son." I felt a cold rage settle in my gut. I watched as he wiped away a tear that I knew was as fake as his credit rating. "I found out she was seeing someone else," Brad continued. a guy she works with. When I confronted her, she went crazy. She started throwing things. She attacked me, and then she called her father. He paused for effect, looking down as if the memory was too painful to bear. Her father is a dangerous man, guys. He has a history of violence. He came to my house with a baseball bat. He threatened to kill me if I didn't let them leave. He took my boy. He took Leo. And now they are hiding out in some shack in the woods, and the police won't help me because of politics. You know how it is. They see a white guy in a nice house, and they assume he is the bad guy. They see a minority woman crying, and they give her whatever she wants. It was subtle, but it was there. The race baiting, the victimhood. He was painting himself as the martyr of a woke system, tapping into a vein of online resentment that he knew would rally an army of trolls to his side. "Please," Brad whispered, leaning into the camera. "I just want my son back. If you see them, please help me. I am terrified for Leo's safety. That old man, he is unstable." The video ended. I looked at the view count. 300,000 views in 2 hours. The comments were scrolling so fast I couldn't read them all, but I saw enough. Words like kidnapper and psycho and poor father flashed by. They were doxing us. Someone had already posted the name of Maya's firm. Someone else was asking if anyone knew where the farm was. Maya sank into a chair. "They are destroying me," she whispered. "Look at the messages, Dad. People are calling for me to be fired. They are saying I am an abuser." Leo looked up from the carrots. "Grandpa," he asked, his voice small, "why is Daddy lying?" I put the phone down on the counter, face down. I walked over to Leo and put my hand on his shoulder. "Because he is scared, son," I said. "And scared people do stupid things. I am not going to school tomorrow." "Am I?" Leo asked. "No, Leo," I said. "You are not." The attacks escalated throughout the afternoon. Maya's email inbox filled with hate mail. Her boss called asking her to take an indefinite leave of absence until this blows over. The court of public opinion had convened, and the verdict was guilty. Brad had won the first round. He had turned the narrative upside down. He had made the abuser the victim. I watched Maya crumble. She curled up on the sofa, sobbing quietly, terrified not for herself, but for Leo. She felt the weight of the world's hatred pressing down on her, and she didn't know how to fight it. But I did. I didn't reply to the comments. I didn't make a reaction video defending my character. I didn't argue with bots and trolls. I walked down to the basement to the war room. I sat at my desk and opened a secure file on my computer. I dialed a number. "Mrs. Higgins," I said when the line picked up. Mr. Freeman, the voice on the other end, was old and frail, but sharp. "I saw the video. That boy has no shame. He never did, Mrs. Higgins," I said. "Are you ready?" "I have been ready since 1998, Elijah," she said. "Send it, Mrs." Higgins was the head housekeeper at the Sterling mansion for 20 years. She had raised Brad more than his own mother had. She knew where the bodies were buried because she had usually been the one told to clean up the mess. And she was also the woman whose mortgage I had paid off 5 years ago when Preston fired her for having arthritis. She still had friends in the house. She still had access to the security system cloud account because Preston was too arrogant to change the passwords. He thought the help was too stupid to remember. Mrs. Higgins sent the file. It was a video clip. 4 minutes and 12 seconds of high-definition footage from the dining room security camera. It had audio, crystal clear audio. I watched it. I watched Preston carving the turkey, his face twisted with disdain. I heard every word. "You people always talk about merit, but you are the first to cry victim." I heard the slur he used about Leo's heritage, the one that didn't make it into my memory until now, but cut just as deep. And then I saw the whine. The camera angle was perfect. It showed Preston standing up, the rage in his eyes, the violent arc of his arm. It showed the red liquid hitting Maya's face. It showed her shock. It showed Leo flinching. And then it showed Brad. It showed him sitting there swirling his drink. It showed the smirk. And it captured the audio perfectly. "Thanks, Dad. Maybe that will finally teach her some respect." It was undeniable. It was brutal. It was the truth stripped of all spin and manipulation. I didn't edit it. I didn't add commentary. I didn't ask people to like and subscribe. I simply uploaded the raw file to every major platform, tagging the news outlets, the local police department, and the board of directors of Sterling Developments. I titled it simply, "Thanksgiving at the Sterlings." Then I went upstairs and made tea. Maya was still on the sofa looking at her phone, watching the hate pour in. "Dad, she said, tears streaming down her face. They found the address. Someone just posted a picture of our mailbox. We have to leave. I handed her the tea. Drink this, I said, and refresh the page. She looked at me confused. What? Refresh the page, Maya. She swiped her finger down the screen. The feed reloaded. The first thing she saw was Brad's video. But the comments had stopped. The likes were freezing. Then she saw the new video. It was already trending. It had 1 million views in 10 minutes. She clicked on it. She watched herself being assaulted. She watched her husband laugh. She watched the truth spread across the internet like a wildfire. She scrolled down to the comments. "Oh my God," she whispered. The tide hadn't just turned, it had evaporated. The internet fury that had been directed at us whipped around and aimed itself squarely at the Sterling family. "This is a hate crime," one comment read. "Look at the husband laughing," another said. "He is a monster. Arrest them both," someone wrote, tagging the FBI. I watched the numbers climb. 2 million views, 5 million. The news channels were picking it up. CNN was running a banner. Breaking news viral video shows assault at prominent developer's home. I didn't feel joy, I felt satisfaction. It was the satisfaction of a mechanic who has finally fixed a broken engine. I had aligned the truth with the perception. Then my phone buzzed. It was Isaiah. Sir Isaiah said, his voice tight with excitement. "Have you seen the market?" "I don't need to see it, Isaiah," I said. "I can hear it falling from here." Sterling Developments wasn't a public company, but they relied on public bonds and private investors. And those investors were watching. They were watching a CEO assault a minority woman. They were watching a PR nightmare unfold in real time. "The board has called an emergency meeting," Isaiah said. "They are trying to distance themselves, but the stock on their partner firms is tanking. The bank just issued a statement saying they are reviewing their relationship with the Sterling family." "You didn't just hurt them, sir. You nuked them." I hung up. I looked at Maya. She wasn't crying anymore. She was reading the comments, the messages of support that were now flooding in, drowning out the hate. "Dad," she said, looking up at me. "Brad just deleted his video. He deleted his account." "He is running," I said, "but there is nowhere to go. The internet never forgets Maya, and neither do I." I walked to the window. It was getting dark. The headlights of a car appeared at the end of the driveway, but it wasn't a Porsche. It was a news van, then another, then a police cruiser. They weren't here to arrest me. They were here to witness the fall of the House of Sterling. I turned to Leo, who had wandered into the room holding his tablet. "Grandpa," he said, his eyes wide, "my friends are texting me. They say you are a hero. They say Dad is a bad man." I knelt down and looked him in the eye. "Your dad made a mistake, Leo," I said. "A big one. But you are not him. You are a Freeman, and Freemans don't lie." I stood up. The war wasn't over. Brad was humiliated, exposing his true nature to the world. He was desperate now, and desperate men are dangerous. But for tonight, we had won the airwaves. We had won the narrative. I looked at the screen one last time. The video was playing on loop on the news. The red wine hitting Maya's face. The laughter, the cruelty. Let them see it, I thought. Let the whole world see exactly who they are. Because tomorrow I am not just going to take their reputation, I am going to take their freedom. The notification on my phone didn't sound like a text message or an email. It sounded like a siren. It was a harsh, piercing digital scream that cut through the quiet hum of the basement command center. I dropped the file I was reading and looked at the screen. A red dot was pulsing on the map. It was located at St. Jude's Academy, the private school where I paid the tuition that Brad claimed credit for. The dot was moving fast. It was moving toward the parking lot. My grandson Leo had pressed the panic button. I had given Leo the watch 3 months ago. It looked like a standard digital smartwatch, the kind all the kids wore to count their steps and play simple games. But the internals were custom built by a contractor I used for high-value cargo tracking. It had a dedicated satellite uplink independent of the cellular network. It had a microphone I could activate remotely. And it had a button on the side that, if held for 3 seconds, sent a distress signal to me and to the private security detail I had quietly assigned to shadow my family since the day Preston Sterling first looked at my daughter with disdain. I tapped the microphone icon on my screen. The audio feed crackled to life. "Let me go, Dad. You are hurting me." It was Leo's voice, high and terrified. "Shut up, Leo. We are going on a trip. Just you and me. We are going to fix this." It was Brad. He sounded unhinged. His voice was tight, breathless, and laced with a manic desperation that made my blood run cold. He wasn't acting like a father picking up his son. He was acting like a fugitive taking a hostage. I didn't call the police. Not yet. Police take minutes. In a situation like this, seconds are the difference between a custody dispute and a tragedy. I pressed a single button on my desk console. It connected me directly to the earpieces of the security team stationed 2 blocks from the school. Code red. I said, my voice calm but deadly. "Target is hostile. He has the package. Intercept immediately. Minimize trauma to the boy. Break the target if necessary." "Copy that, sir," a voice replied. ETA 30 seconds. I grabbed my keys and ran up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. My 75-year-old knees protested, but the adrenaline flooded my system, masking the pain. I was not a gardener today. I was a grandfather protecting his blood. I jumped into my truck and roared out of the driveway, my tires spinning on the gravel. I drove with one hand, the other holding the phone, listening to the nightmare unfold in real time. According to the GPS, Brad was dragging Leo across the faculty parking lot. I could hear the scuffle through the watch. I could hear a teacher shouting, "Mr. Sterling, stop. You cannot take him. He is not signed out." "Get back!" Brad screamed. "Get back, or I will hurt you." He was threatening a teacher. He was completely out of control. He had lost his money, his house, and his reputation. Now he was trying to steal the only leverage he had left. He thought if he had Leo, he could force Maya to drop the divorce. He thought he could force me to unlock the accounts. He was thinking like a terrorist. I drove faster, running a stop sign, praying my men would get there in time. At the school, the scene was chaos. Brad had bypassed the front office by kicking open a side gate. He had found Leo at recess. He wasn't there to pick him up. He was there to snatch him. I heard the sound of a car door opening through the audio feed. "Get in the car, Leo," Brad yelled. "Get in the car now." "No," Leo screamed. "I want Mom. I want Grandpa. I am your father," Brad roared. "You do what I say." Then I heard it, the sound of screeching tires. Not my truck. It was the security team. 2 black SUVs swerved into the parking lot, blocking the exit and boxing in Brad's Porsche. 4 men stepped out. They were not wearing uniforms. They were wearing suits. They looked like bankers, but they moved like vipers. These were men who had guarded diplomats in war zones. They were on my payroll because they knew the difference between law enforcement and protection. Brad stopped. I heard his confusion through the microphone. "Who are you? Get out of my way. This is my son." "Mr. Sterling," the lead agent said, his voice calm and authoritative. "Let go of the boy." Brad laughed, a jagged, broken sound. "You work for him, don't you? The old man. He thinks he can stop me. I have rights. This is my property." He called his son property. That was all I needed to hear. "Take him," I said into the phone. The agents moved. It wasn't a fight, it was a surgical procedure. 2 agents moved toward Leo, shielding him, separating him from his father. The other 2 moved on Brad. Brad tried to throw a punch. It was a wild, undisciplined swing. The agent ducked effortlessly, stepped inside Brad's guard, and applied a joint lock that forced Brad to his knees with a scream of agony. "My arm," Brad shrieked. "You broke my arm. You are being detained for attempted kidnapping and violation of a restraining order," the agent said, pressing Brad's face into the asphalt. "Do not resist." I pulled into the school parking lot just as the sirens began to wail in the distance. The police were arriving late as expected. I jumped out of the truck and ran toward the group. Leo saw me. He broke away from the agent, shielding him, and ran into my arms. He was shaking so hard his teeth were chattering. "Grandpa." He sobbed, burying his face in my coat. He squeezed me. He said we were going away forever. I held him tight, wrapping my arms around his small frame, creating a fortress of wool and love. I looked over his head at Brad. Brad was pinned to the ground, his expensive coat covered in dirt, his face scraped and bleeding. He looked up at me with eyes full of hate and madness. "You stole my son," Brad spat, spitting blood onto the pavement. "You stole my life." I walked over to him, still holding Leo. I looked down at the man who had thrown wine at my daughter and tried to kidnap my grandson. "I didn't steal anything, Brad," I said, my voice low enough so only he could hear. "I repossessed it. You defaulted on your obligations as a father. You defaulted on your obligations as a husband, and now you are paying the penalty." Sheriff Miller arrived, his car sliding to a halt. He jumped out, hand on his weapon, assessing the scene. He saw the black SUVs. He saw my private security team. He saw Brad on the ground. He knew exactly what had happened. "Mr. Freeman," the sheriff said, nodding to me. "Is the boy okay?" "He is shaken, Sheriff," I said, "but he is safe." Mr. Sterling attempted to forcibly remove him from school grounds in violation of the protective order served yesterday. My security team intervened. Sheriff Miller looked at Brad. He looked at the bruised arm, the scraped face. He didn't ask if the force used was excessive. He knew Brad Sterling. He knew the video. He knew who the bad guy was. "Get him up," the sheriff told his deputy. They hauled Brad to his feet. He was crying now, the rage replaced by the realization of his circumstances. "Sheriff, arrest them," Brad shouted, nodding at my agents. "They assaulted me. They are private mercenaries. This is illegal." "You violated a court order," Brad the sheriff said, snapping the handcuffs on. "You tried to snatch a minor. That is kidnapping. That is a felony. You are going to jail." "But I am his father," Brad pleaded. "I just wanted to see him. I just wanted to talk to him." "You forfeited that right when you tried to drag him into a car against his will," I said. I looked at the lead agent of my team. His name was Cole. He gave me a subtle nod. The situation was contained. "Good work, Cole," I said. "Just doing the job," Mr. Freeman, Cole replied. I walked Leo back to my truck. I didn't want him to see his father being shoved into the back of a police cruiser. I didn't want that to be his memory of his father. But Brad had made that choice. As I buckled Leo in, I checked his watch. It was still transmitting. "You did good, Leo," I said, smoothing his hair. "You were brave. You used the tool I gave you." "I was scared," Grandpa Leo whispered. He didn't look like Dad. He looked like a monster. "Sometimes people wear masks, Leo," I said. "And sometimes the mask falls off." I drove us away from the school. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a cold, hard knot in my stomach. This wasn't a financial dispute anymore. It wasn't about foreclosures or credit scores. Brad had crossed the line into physical violence. He had targeted a child. I picked up my phone and called Isaiah. "He tried to take Leo," I said. I heard Isaiah inhale sharply on the other end. "Is the boy safe?" "He is with me," I said. "Brad is in custody. Sheriff Miller has him." "This changes the landscape, sir," Isaiah said, his voice shifting into war mode. "Violation of a restraining order is one thing. Attempted kidnapping is another. We can petition for an emergency revocation of all parental rights. We can request he be held without bail as a flight risk." "Do it," I said. And Isaiah, "Yes, sir." "Go after the enablers," I said. Brad didn't come up with this on his own. He is too weak. He is desperate. Someone told him to grab the boy. Someone told him that Leo was the chip he needed to trade. "You think it was Preston?" Isaiah asked. "I think Preston Sterling is a man who thinks people are assets," I said. "I think he told his son to secure the asset. Find out. Subpoena the phone records. If Preston told him to do it, I want him charged with conspiracy." "Understood, sir," Isaiah said. "I will have the motions filed within the hour." I hung up. I looked at Leo in the rearview mirror. He was staring out the window, watching the trees pass by. He looked older than 12. He looked like he had seen the world for what it really was. "We are going home, Leo," I said. "Mom is waiting." Grandpa Leo asked, not looking away from the window. "Is Dad going to prison?" I didn't lie to him. I didn't sugarcoat it. "Yes, Leo," I said. "He is." "Good," Leo whispered. One word. Good. It broke my heart more than the screaming. It told me everything I needed to know about the kind of father Brad had been behind closed doors when the cameras weren't rolling. He hadn't just been absent. He had been a source of fear. I gripped the steering wheel. I had taken their money. I had taken their house. I had taken their reputation. But it wasn't enough. They had terrorized my family. They had made a little boy afraid of his own father. I pulled into the driveway of the farm. Maya was running out the door before the truck even stopped. She ripped the door open and pulled Leo into her arms, crying, burying her face in his neck. I watched them holding each other in the cold winter light. I took out my phone. I looked at the contact for the district attorney. I had helped get him elected 5 years ago with a donation from a PAC that no one knew I controlled. I dialed the number. "Hello, Elijah," the DA answered, sounding surprised. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I am calling about the Sterling case," I said. "I heard about the video," Elijah, the DA said. "It is ugly. But it is mostly a civil matter, isn't it?" "Not anymore," I said. Brad Sterling just tried to kidnap my grandson. He is in custody. I want you to prosecute him to the fullest extent of the law. I want the book thrown at him. And I want you to look into his father, Preston the DA asked. He is a pillar of the community, Elijah. He is a pillar of salt, I said, and he is about to dissolve. I have evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. I am sending it over. You are declaring war on the biggest developer in the state, the DA warned. The war is already over, I said, watching my daughter hold her son. I am just cleaning up the battlefield. I hung up. I walked over to Maya and Leo. I wrapped my arms around both of them. We are safe, I said. He can't hurt us anymore. But I knew the truth. Brad was in a cell, but Preston was still out there. And Preston Sterling was not the kind of man who let his son go to prison without burning the world down first. He would retaliate. He would escalate. But he didn't know I was waiting. He didn't know I had been waiting for 50 years. Let him come. I had more than a baseball bat waiting for him this time. I had the truth. And the truth is the only weapon that never runs out of ammunition. The courthouse smelled of floor wax and desperate prayers. It was a smell I knew well, not from being a defendant, but from watching the machinery of justice grind up men who looked like me for 50 years. I sat in the back row of the gallery, my hands resting on my knees, watching the back of my daughter's head. Maya was sitting at the plaintiff's table, her posture rigid, her shoulders hunched as if she were expecting a blow. Next to her, Isaiah sat like a stone statue, his expensive suit absorbing the fluorescent light. On the other side of the aisle sat the Sterling clan. Preston Sterling was there wearing a suit that probably cost more than the bail bond he had posted for his son an hour ago. He looked tired. The bags under his eyes were heavy, and his skin had a gray pallor that spoke of sleepless nights and scotch for breakfast. But his arrogance remained intact. It was the only thing holding him upright. Beside him, Brad sat slumped in his chair, picking at a loose thread on his cuff. He looked small. The handcuffs had left red marks on his wrists, and his confidence was cracked, but seeing his father there had given him a second wind. He turned and caught my eye. He smirked. It was a weak, trembling thing, but it was there. He thought he had won. He thought that because he had scraped together the last of his family's liquid cash to buy his freedom for a few days, he was back in control. They had countersued. Of course they had. Assault, they claimed. Kidnapping. Endangerment of a minor. They were throwing every legal stone they could find, hoping one would hit me between the eyes and knock me down. They wanted to paint me as a violent, unhinged old man who had snatched a child from a loving father. They wanted to prove that a gardener living in a farmhouse was unfit to raise a Sterling. All rise, the bailiff shouted, his voice booming off the mahogany panels. Judge Marcus Reynolds entered the room. He was a black man in his 60s with a face carved from granite and eyes that had seen every lie a lawyer could tell. He sat down, adjusted his robes, and looked over the top of his reading glasses at the assembly. We are here for an emergency custody hearing and a review of the temporary restraining order in the matter of Sterling versus Sterling, Judge Reynolds said, his voice deep and resonant. I have read the initial filings. Let us proceed. The Sterling's lawyer stood up. His name was Arthur Vance, a man known for his scorched earth tactics and his $300 haircuts. He walked to the center of the room, buttoning his jacket with a flourish. Your Honor, Vance began, his voice dripping with practiced outrage. We are here today to rectify a gross miscarriage of justice. My client, Mr. Bradley Sterling, is a loving father and a respected member of this community. 2 days ago, he went to his son's school to pick him up, as is his parental right. Instead, he was assaulted by a private paramilitary force hired by his father-in-law, Mr. Elijah Freeman. He was beaten, humiliated, and falsely arrested. Vance turned and pointed a finger at me. I didn't blink. This man, Vance continued, is a menace. He has a history of violence. He threatened my client with a baseball bat. He kidnapped Mrs. Sterling and the minor child Leo, holding them hostage in a dilapidated shack on the edge of town. Your Honor, we are asking for the immediate return of the child to the family home and a permanent restraining order against Mr. Freeman. Furthermore, we argue that Mr. Freeman lacks the financial means and the moral character to provide a safe environment for the child. I watched Maya. She was shaking. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. She was terrified that they would believe him. She was terrified that the world would see her father as she had seen him for so long, as a poor man with nothing but a temper. Isaiah stood up. He didn't strut. He didn't point fingers. He simply walked to the podium and placed a single file folder on it. Your Honor, Isaiah said, Mr. Vance tells a compelling story. It is a shame it belongs in the fiction section, The facts are simple. Mr. Sterling violated a court order. He attempted to abduct the child. We have video evidence. We have audio recordings. Vance jumped up. Context, Your Honor. My client was distressed. He was worried about his son living in squalor. We are talking about a boy raised in a mansion now forced to sleep on a floor in a drafty farmhouse. This isn't just about safety, it is about stability. Mr. Freeman is a retired truck driver with a meager pension. How can he provide for a child accustomed to the best schools and health care? This is negligence masquerading as family values. There it was. The poverty card. They were banking on the idea that in America money equals morality. They thought that because I didn't flash my wealth, I didn't have any. They thought my lack of debt was a lack of worth. Judge Reynolds looked at Vance, then he looked at me. He looked at my faded jacket, my work boots, my calloused hands. I saw him assessing me. He didn't see a bum. He saw a man who worked. But the court works on proof, not vibes. Mr. Thomas, the judge, said to Isaiah, "Address the financial stability of the current guardian. The court needs to ensure the child's needs are met." Isaiah turned to me. He gave a microscopic nod. It was time. I stood up. The room went quiet. The wood of the bench creaked as I shifted my weight. I walked past the bar, past Isaiah, and stood before the bench. Mr. Freeman Vance scoffed. "You are represented by counsel. Sit down." I ignored him. I looked directly at Judge Reynolds. "Your Honor." I said, my voice steady and clear, not the voice of a gardener, but the voice of a CEO. "May I approach the bench?" Judge Reynolds looked at me intrigued. "You may." I walked up the steps. I reached into my jacket pocket. I didn't pull out a weapon. I pulled out a thick envelope sealed with red wax. I placed it on the judge's desk. "Mr. Vance claims I am unfit because I am poor," I said loud enough for the back row to hear. "He claims I cannot provide for my grandson because I worked with my hands. He claims my home is a shack because it doesn't have columns out front." I turned to look at Preston Sterling. He was leaning forward, a sneer curling his lip. He was enjoying this. He thought I was begging. "I would like to submit this document into evidence," I continued, turning back to the judge. "It is a certified copy of my personal tax return for the last fiscal year, along with an audited statement of assets for the Freeman Trust." Vance laughed. "A tax return. Your Honor, we don't need to see his Social Security checks. This is a waste of the court's time." "Read it, Judge," I said softly. Judge Reynolds picked up the envelope. He broke the seal. He slid the heavy bond paper out. He adjusted his glasses. The room waited. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. You could hear Brad tapping his foot nervously. Judge Reynolds read the first line. Then he stopped. He blinked. He took off his glasses, wiped them on his robe, and put them back on. He read it again. He looked up at me. His eyes were wide, not with shock, but with a sudden dawning respect. He looked from me to the paper, then to Preston Sterling, then back to me. "Mr. Freeman, the judge," said, his voice losing its judicial detachment for a brief second. "Is this figure correct?" "It is, Your Honor," I said. "Every cent." Judge Reynolds cleared his throat. He looked at the court reporter. "Let the record show," the judge said, his voice booming, "that Mr. Elijah Freeman has submitted proof of income. For the tax year ending December 31st, Mr. Freeman paid—" He paused, looking at the number again to be sure. He paid $5,200,000 in federal income taxes. The silence in the courtroom wasn't just heavy, it was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum, where all the air had been sucked out. Vance's jaw dropped, literally dropped. He stood there, mouth open, staring at the judge. Preston Sterling made a noise in the back of his throat like a dying engine. He grabbed the railing in front of him, his knuckles turning white. $5 million, Brad whispered, loud enough to be heard, "in taxes. That puts his annual income," Judge Reynolds continued reading from the statement, "substantially north of $40 million. The statement also lists assets including commercial real estate, logistics fleets, and intellectual property patents valued in the 9 figures. The judge looked at Vance. "Mr. Vance," the judge said, a hint of steel in his voice, "you argued that Mr. Freeman lacks the financial means to care for the child. It appears that Mr. Freeman could buy the school the child attends and pave the playground with gold if he chose to." I turned around. I looked at Preston. His face was a mask of horror. He wasn't looking at a gardener anymore. He was looking at a titan. He was realizing that the man he had dismissed, the man he had led into his home through the service entrance, was a man who could buy and sell him 10 times over before breakfast. He realized who Ruth Holdings was. The blood drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint. He slumped back in his chair, his eyes locked on mine. He saw the truth. He saw the trap. He saw the 50 years of patience that had led to this moment. I looked at Brad. He was staring at me as if I were an alien. His worldview was shattering. He couldn't compute it. Black man equals poor, old man equals weak. The equation was broken. I turned back to the judge. "Your Honor," I said, "my house may look like a shack from the road because I value privacy over pretension. But inside it is warm, it is safe, and it is paid for, unlike the home my son-in-law is currently being evicted from." "Objection," Vance stammered, weak and desperate. "Relevance." "Overruled," Judge Reynolds snapped. "Your Honor," I continued, "I don't want custody because I am rich. I want custody because I am the only man in this room who hasn't treated my grandson like a bargaining chip. I want to raise him to know that a man's worth isn't in his bank account even though mine happens to be full. It is in his word. And my word is that Leo stays with me." Judge Reynolds looked at me for a long moment. There was a connection there, a silent understanding between two men who had climbed mountains to get to where they were. "The court finds the defendant's argument regarding financial instability to be without merit," the judge said dryly. "In fact, it borders on the absurd. The temporary restraining order against Mr. Bradley Sterling remains in effect. Full temporary custody is awarded to Mrs. Maya Sterling pending a final hearing." He slammed the gavel down. It sounded like a gunshot. "Court is adjourned." I walked back to the table. Maya was staring at me, tears streaming down her face again, but this time they were tears of shock. "Dad," she whispered. $5 million. In taxes." I winked at her. "I had a good year, baby girl." I packed up my files. Isaiah was smiling a small shark-like grin. "That was enjoyable, sir," Isaiah said. I looked across the aisle. Preston was trying to stand up, but his legs weren't working right. Brad was just sitting there staring at the floor. I walked over to them. The bailiff stepped forward, but I waved him off. I wasn't going to hit them. I didn't need a bat anymore. "Preston," I said. He looked up. His eyes were glassy. "You," Preston whispered. "It was you. All this time." I leaned in close. "You owe me $50, Preston," I said. "For the medicine." He flinched. He remembered. "I took the interest," I said. I turned and walked out of the courtroom, my daughter on my arm, my lawyer by my side, leaving the Sterlings in the wreckage of their own assumptions. We walked out into the sunlight, and for the first time in 40 years I felt like the debt was paid. But the war wasn't over. Preston was down, but he wasn't out. And I knew that a man who loses his kingdom will try to burn down the village before he leaves. I checked my watch. It was noon. Phase 2 was complete, Phase 3 was about to begin, and Phase 3 was going to be personal. The headlights cut through the darkness of my front yard like twin blades slicing through black velvet. I was sitting in my favorite leather armchair facing the door, a cup of chamomile tea resting on the small side table next to a first edition of The Art of War. I wasn't reading. I was waiting. I knew Preston Sterling. I knew that a man who had lived his entire life building a monument to his own ego would not let that monument be torn down without trying to kill the architect of his destruction. He wouldn't go to his lawyers. He wouldn't go to the bank. He would come to the source. I heard the car skid on the gravel, followed by the sickening crunch of metal hitting the old oak tree near the porch. He was driving fast and reckless, fueled by the kind of desperation that turns cowards into killers. I took a sip of tea. It was hot, soothing against the cold knot of anticipation in my stomach. Upstairs, Maya and Leo were safe, locked in the panic room, disguised as a linen closet, soundproof and secure. I had told them we were running a drill. I didn't want them to hear what was about to happen. The front door didn't open. It exploded inward. Preston Sterling kicked it open, the lock splintering the doorframe just as his son had done days before. But unlike Brad, Preston didn't come empty-handed. He stumbled into the hallway, his expensive suit torn and stained with what looked like vomit and scotch. In his right hand, shaking violently, was a silver pistol. It looked like a revolver, probably a collector's piece he kept in his desk drawer, something he bought to look tough but never fired. Tonight, however, his finger was on the trigger and his eyes were wild with a madness that had consumed his rationality. He saw me sitting there. He froze. The recognition washed over his face, twisting his features into a mask of pure hatred. He didn't see the CEO of Ruth Holdings. He didn't see a rival. He saw the past coming back to haunt him. "You," he rasped, aiming the gun at my chest. "I know you." I took another sip of tea, setting the cup down on the saucer with a deliberate clink. "Hello, Preston," I said, my voice calm, steady. "You are trespassing." "You are that driver," Preston shouted, stepping further into the room, the gun wavering. "You are that black truck driver from years ago, the one with the sick wife, the beggar." I didn't flinch. I let him see me. I let him see the man he had dismissed as nothing 50 years ago. "My wife's name was Ruth," I said. "And yes, I drove a truck. I drove it right through the hole you left in the market." "You dare steal my company!" Preston screamed, spittle flying from his mouth. "You dare take my house! You filthy ungrateful! I gave you work! My father gave you work! And this is how you repay us! You steal my legacy!" He wasn't just angry, he was offended. In his twisted worldview, I was stealing something that belonged to him by divine right. He couldn't conceive that he had lost it. He could only believe it had been stolen. "I didn't steal anything, Preston," I said, leaning back in the chair. "I bought it. I paid market value for your debt," which frankly was overvalued considering how rotten the foundation was. "Shut up," Preston roared, cocking the hammer of the gun. The click echoed in the silent house. "Sign it back. Call your lawyers. Sign the company back over to me right now, or I will blow your heart out of your chest." He was trembling. He was sweating. He was a man who had never faced a consequence he couldn't buy his way out of, and now he was facing the ultimate foreclosure. "You are going to kill me, Preston?" I asked, looking at the gun. "And then what? Do you think the debt dies with me? My daughter inherits Ruth Holdings, and trust me, she is less forgiving than I am." "I will kill her too," Preston hissed, his eyes darting to the stairs. "I will burn this whole shack down with all of you inside. I am Preston Sterling. I built this town. No one takes from me. No one." I looked at him. I saw the fear behind the rage. He was terrified of being poor. He was terrified of being irrelevant. He was terrified of being me. "You didn't build anything, Preston," I said softly. "You inherited a fortune and you squandered it. You built buildings with cheap concrete that are cracking as we speak. You stole from your employees' pension funds. You are a fraud, and tonight everyone knows it. Don't you talk to me like that," Preston screamed, taking a step closer, the gun now just a few feet from my face. "I am a king. You are dirt. I should have had security throw you out 50 years ago. I should have let your wife die on the street instead of my kitchen." There it was, the confession, the admission that he remembered. He remembered Ruth. He remembered letting her die. And he didn't care. I felt a cold fire in my veins, but I didn't move. I didn't reach for a weapon. I didn't need to. "Preston," I said, my voice dropping an octave, "before you pull that trigger, I want you to do one thing for me." "What?" Preston sneered, his finger tightening. "You want to pray." "No," I said. "I want you to look out the window." Preston blinked. He looked confused. "What?" "Look out the window behind you," I repeated, pointing calmly. "Just take a look." For a second, curiosity warred with rage. He glanced over his shoulder toward the large bay window that looked out onto the front yard. At that exact moment, I pressed the button concealed under the armrest of my chair. The floodlights outside slammed on, turning the night into day. The sudden brightness was blinding. Preston yelled, shielding his eyes with his free hand. Then the voice boomed from a megaphone loud enough to shake the walls. "Federal agents, drop the weapon. Come out with your hands up." Preston spun around, panic replacing the rage. He looked at me, then back at the window. Through the glass, he could see them. Not just the local police, it was an army. There were FBI agents in windbreakers holding assault rifles. There were armored vehicles blocking the driveway. And behind the police line, there was something even more devastating for a man like Preston Sterling. There were news vans. I had called them. I had told the producer of the biggest news station in the state that the missing CEO of Sterling Developments, who was wanted for questioning regarding federal fraud charges, was currently at my residence threatening a witness. They had arrived 10 minutes ago, setting up their cameras in the dark, waiting for the show. "What did you do?" Preston whispered, the gun lowering slightly. "I invited an audience," I said. I pointed to the bookshelf behind him. A tiny red light was blinking on the spine of a book. "You are live, Preston," I said. "That camera is streaming directly to a private server which is currently broadcasting to the news feed outside. They heard everything. They heard you admit to fraud. They heard you threaten to murder my family. They heard you talk about my wife. Preston looked at the camera. He looked at the window where the red and blue lights were now flashing, strobing against the walls of my living room. "You set me up," he gasped. "I outmaneuvered you," I corrected him. "You thought you were walking into a shack to kill an old man. You walked into a federal sting operation." Preston raised the gun again, pointing it back at me. His hand was shaking so bad I thought it might go off by accident. "I will still kill you," he cried, tears of frustration running down his face. "I have nothing left to lose." "You have your life, Preston," I said. "Put the gun down. Don't die in a gardener's house. It is beneath you, isn't it?" The megaphone boomed again. "Preston Sterling, we are breaching in 3 seconds. Drop the weapon. 1, 2. Preston looked at the gun. He looked at me. He looked at the door. He realized it was over. The narrative he had built for 70 years, the myth of the invincible Sterling patriarch, was ending, not with a bang, but with a live stream of him crying in a stranger's living room. He dropped the gun. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. He fell to his knees, covering his face with his hands, sobbing. "My life," he wailed. "My reputation." The door was kicked open the rest of the way. Agents swarmed the room, moving with professional efficiency. They grabbed Preston, hauling him up from the floor, slamming him against the wall to handcuff him. "Preston Sterling, you are under arrest for attempted murder, home invasion, and federal wire fraud," an agent recited. Preston looked at me as they dragged him out. He looked broken. He looked small. "Why?" he whispered. "Why did you do this?" I picked up my tea. It was still warm. "Because you spilled wine on my daughter's shirt," I said, "and you forgot to say sorry." They took him out into the blinding lights. I stood up and walked to the window. I watched as the cameras flashed, capturing the image of Preston Sterling in handcuffs, his head bowed, his legacy in ruins. The reporters were shouting questions, thrusting microphones at him. He was the lead story on the 11 o'clock news. The fall of a titan. I saw Isaiah standing by the police barricade, talking to the FBI agent in charge. He looked up and saw me in the window. He gave me a small nod. It was done. The man who had closed the door on my dying wife was now going to spend the rest of his life behind a door he couldn't open. I walked to the bookshelf and turned off the camera. I went to the panic room door and unlocked it. Maya and Leo were sitting on the floor holding each other. They looked up as I entered. "Is he gone?" Leo asked. "Yes, son," I said. "He is gone." "Is he coming back?" Maya asked. "No," I said. "He is never coming back." I sat down with them on the floor of the closet. I felt tired. A deep, bone-weary tiredness that comes from carrying a burden for 40 years and finally setting it down. "What happens now, Dad?" Maya asked, resting her head on my shoulder. "Now," I said, closing my eyes. "Now we build something new, something that doesn't have rot in the foundation." But first I thought I need to sleep. For the first time in decades, I wasn't waiting for a check to clear. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I wasn't waiting for revenge. The ledger was balanced. The debt was paid in full. The metal doors of the county detention center slammed shut behind us with a sound that felt like the closing of a coffin. The air inside was stale, smelling of industrial cleaner and unwashed bodies. I walked beside my daughter Maya, my hand hovering near her elbow but not touching it. She needed to do this on her own. She needed to walk this last mile of her marriage without me carrying her. She was trembling. Not from fear, but from a grief that was so raw it seemed to vibrate off her skin. Despite everything, despite the wine, the insults, the attempted kidnapping, a part of her still loved him. It is a terrible thing to witness the death of love. It doesn't die quietly. It thrashes and screams and bargains for one last breath. Maya was here to see if there was anything left to save. She was here looking for the man she thought she married, hoping that the monster we had seen over the last few days was just a temporary madness. I knew better. I knew that pressure doesn't change a man, it reveals him. But I stayed silent. We were led to a private visitation room because I had the best lawyers in the state, and because I had made a few calls to the warden who remembered a donation I made to the prison library fund. We were granted a contact visit. No glass, just a table and 2 chairs bolted to the floor. I stood in the corner, my back against the cinder block wall, blending into the shadows. I was the observer. This was Maya's courtroom. The door on the other side of the room buzzed and opened. A guard stepped in, followed by Brad. My son-in-law looked like a ghost of the man who had sat at the Thanksgiving table. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. His hair, usually styled with expensive product, was greasy and flat. He hadn't shaved. His eyes were darting around the room, manic and bloodshot. He saw Maya, and for a second his face lit up. Not with love, but with a desperate, hungry calculation. Maya, he breathed, rushing toward the table. You came. I knew you would come. He sat down, reaching for her hands. Maya didn't pull away immediately. She let him take her hands, her eyes searching his face, looking for the husband who used to bring her coffee in bed, looking for the father of her child. Are you okay? She whispered. It has been hell, Maya. Brad said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You have to get me out of here. The food is inedible. The bed is concrete. And the people in here, they are animals. You have to talk to your father. He glanced at me, then his eyes narrowing. He didn't acknowledge me. To him, I was still the enemy, the obstacle. Maya pulled her hands back slowly. I wanted to see you, Brad, she said. I wanted to ask you why. Why what? Brad snapped, impatient. Why I tried to get my son back. Why I tried to save my family. Maya, focus. We don't have time for feelings. We need strategy. Did you talk to the lawyers? Did you get access to the accounts? Maya blinked. It was a slow, painful movement, as if she were waking up from a long coma. The accounts, she repeated. Yes, the money. Brad hissed, leaning over the table. Your father has millions. He can post my bail. He can hire a real legal team, not these public defenders who want me to plead out. You need to convince him, Maya. Tell him I am sorry. Tell him I was drunk. Tell him whatever he wants to hear. Just get the check. I watched Maya's face. The grief was fading, replaced by a dawning horror. You want money? She asked, her voice hollow. I want my life back, Brad said, pounding the table lightly with his fist. I want to go home. Look, I know things got messy. My dad, he pushed me. He told me to be tough, but we can fix this. Once I am out, we can go away. Just you and me. We can start over. With your father's money, we can go anywhere. Europe, Asia. We can leave all this behind. He was planning a vacation on my dime while wearing a prison jumpsuit. The delusion was breathtaking. Maya took a deep breath. Her posture shifted. She sat up straighter. You haven't asked about Leo, she said. Brad waved his hand dismissively. Leo is fine. He is with you, isn't he? He is safe. Look, Maya, the kid is resilient. He will get over it. What matters right now is me. I am the one in a cage. I am the one suffering. He will get over it, Maya whispered. You tried to kidnap him, Brad. You terrified him. He wakes up screaming at night. He is soft, Brad sneered. Just like you. That is the problem. You coddle him. I was trying to make him a man. But we can discuss parenting styles later. Right now, I need you to go to the bank. Maya stared at him. The silence stretched thin and tight like a wire about to snap. You don't love us, she said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Brad rolled his eyes. He actually rolled his eyes. Oh my God, Maya, stop with the melodrama. Of course I love you. Why else would I have married you? Why did you marry me, Brad? Maya asked. Really? Why? Brad sighed, leaning back in his chair, crossing his arms. The mask finally slipped completely. He was tired of pretending. He was tired of wooing her. He figured he had nothing left to lose, so he might as well use the truth as a weapon. You want to know why Brad said, his lip curling? Because you were safe, Maya. You were easy. Safe, Maya asked. You weren't like the girls I grew up with, Brad said. The debutantes, the sharks. They wanted things. They demanded things. They would have eaten me alive if I failed. But you were just grateful to be there. He chuckled, a dark, ugly sound. You looked at me like I was a god just because I bought you dinner. You didn't care about the business. You didn't ask questions. I thought you would be a good wife. Low maintenance. You would keep the house clean, raise the kid, and never challenge me. He leaned forward again, his face inches from hers. I married you because I thought you would be a high-class servant, Maya. I thought you knew your place. I didn't know you came with a sleeper cell of a father who would ruin my life the moment I raised my voice. The air in the room seemed to freeze. I felt my own hands curling into fists, but I didn't move. This was Maya's moment. She looked at him. She looked at the man she had shared a bed with for 12 years. She looked at the father of her child, and finally she saw him. She didn't see the handsome face or the expensive clothes he used to wear. She saw the rot. She saw the small, petty soul of a man who had never earned a single thing in his life. You thought I was a servant, she whispered. I thought you were loyal, Brad corrected. But I guess I was wrong. You are just as vindictive as your father. Now are you going to get the money or not? Because if you walk out that door without promising to bail me out, I swear to God, Maya, I will make sure you never see a dime of child support. I will drag this divorce out until you are broke. Maya stood up. Her chair scraped against the linoleum floor. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply reached across the table. And she slapped him. It wasn't a slap of hysteria. It was a slap of precision. Her palm connected with his cheek with a crack that sounded like a pistol shot in the small room. Brad's head snapped to the side. He froze, his hand flying to his face in shock. The guards stepped forward, reaching for their belts, but I held up a hand, stopping them. Not yet. Maya leaned over the table, her voice steady and cold. That was for the wine, she said. And this? She took off her wedding ring. It was a diamond solitaire paid for by my money, though she hadn't known it at the time. She placed it on the metal table. It made a small, final click. This is for the last 12 years. Brad stared at the ring, then at her. His face was red where she had struck him. You will regret this, he hissed. You are nothing without me. You are a nobody. I am a freeman, Maya said, and I am done serving you. She turned and walked toward the door. She didn't look back. She didn't hesitate. She walked with her head high, her spine straight, the ghost of Ruth walking beside her. Maya. Brad screamed, standing up. Maya, get back here. You can't leave me here. I am a Sterling. The guards grabbed him, forcing him back into the chair. I opened the door for my daughter. She stepped out into the hallway. I looked back at Brad one last time. He was struggling against the guards, screaming my daughter's name, terrified of the silence that was about to swallow him. I closed the door. We walked down the long corridor toward the exit. Maya didn't say a word until we pushed through the heavy exterior doors and stepped into the parking lot. The sun was shining. The air was crisp. She stopped and took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the clean air of freedom. She looked at me. Her eyes were clear. The shadow that had been hanging over her for days, for years, was gone. Did you hear him, Dad? She asked. I heard him, baby girl, I said. He never loved me, she said. I put my arm around her shoulders. He didn't know how to love Maya, I said. He only knew how to own. And you cannot own a person. She nodded. She looked at her bare finger where the ring used to be. She rubbed the skin as if cleaning off a stain. I am ready, she said. Ready for what? To take them down, she said. All the way. No mercy. I smiled. That is my girl. We walked to the truck. The heartbreak was over. The mourning was done. Now there was only the work. And as I started the engine, I knew that the Sterling family had made a fatal error. They thought they had broken my daughter. Instead, they had forged her into steel. And steel cuts deep. The auction house smelled of desperate cologne and stale ambition. It was a cavernous room in downtown Hartford, usually reserved for selling fine art, but today it was hosting a funeral. The corpse was the Sterling Empire, and the vultures had gathered to pick the bones clean. I stood in the back of the room, my hand resting lightly on Maya's arm. She was wearing a simple navy dress, her hair pulled back, her face scrubbed clean of the shame that had coated it just a week ago. She didn't look like a victim anymore. She looked like a witness. We weren't there to gloat. We were there to finish the job. The room was packed. Hedge fund managers in fleece vests, real estate sharks in sharkskin suits, and collectors looking for a bargain all whispered and pointed as the screens displayed the loot. There were paintings that Preston had bought to impress people he hated. There were sculptures that looked like twisted metal junk but cost more than a college education. And there, lined up outside the glass walls, visible to everyone, were the crown jewels, the cars, the boats. And sitting in the front row, hunched over like a question mark, was Brad. He was out on bail. Preston had liquidated his last remaining personal IRA to post the bond, a final act of financial suicide to keep his son out of general population for a few more weeks until the trial. Brad looked terrible. His skin was gray, his eyes sunken. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing jeans and a hoodie, trying to look anonymous but failing because arrogance has a smell that you can't wash off. He was watching his life being sold lot by lot. The auctioneer, a man with a voice like a machine gun, started the bidding. Lot 42, a 50-foot Sunseeker yacht, the Sea King, formerly owned by Preston Sterling. I watched Brad flinch. He loved that boat. He used to take his mistresses on it, telling Maya he was at a conference. Opening bid at $200,000. Do I hear 200? The paddles went up. The price climbed. 250, 300. I waited. I let the sharks have their fun. When the bidding stalled at 350, I raised my paddle. It was number 75. My age. 400,000, I said, my voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. Heads turned. They saw the black man in the tweed jacket. They saw Elijah Freeman. By now, rumors had started to circulate about who I really was. The whispers changed from curiosity to respect. 400 going once, sold to bidder number 75. Brad turned around. He saw me. His eyes widened with hate. He mouthed something that looked like "go to hell." I didn't look at him. I looked at the auctioneer. "Mr. Freeman," the auctioneer asked, sensing the drama. "Any instructions for the title?" "Yes," I said loud enough for the room to hear. "Transfer the title to the Mystic Sea Scouts of America. They need a training vessel. Let the kids learn how to sail on a boat that finally does some good." A ripple of shock went through the room. I had just bought a $500,000 yacht to give it away to Boy Scouts. Brad turned purple. He gripped the back of the chair in front of him. He knew I was doing it to spite him. He knew I was taking his toys and giving them to the poor. Next up, the auctioneer said, his voice shaky, "The estate at 42 Oak Creek Drive." The room went silent. This was the big one. The mansion. The scene of the crime. Opening bid at $2 million. This was a steal. The land alone was worth $3 million. But the house had a stigma now. It was the house where the video was filmed. It was the house of the wine thrower. $2 million, 2.1, 2.2. I let them fight over it for a while. I watched Brad. He was crying. Actual tears were running down his face. That house was his identity. It was where he thought he was a king. $3 million, I said, raising my paddle. The room froze. $3 million was market value. It was a knockout bid. No one wanted to fight the man who gave away yachts. "Sold," Mr. Freeman, the auctioneer asked. "Instructions." I looked at Maya. She nodded. "We had discussed this." "Transfer the deed to the Harriet Tubman Shelter for Women and Children," I said. "It will be a safe house for victims of domestic abuse. I think it is poetic that a house built on arrogance will now protect women from men like the former owners." The room erupted in whispers. Some people clapped. Brad put his head in his hands. He couldn't take it. His castle was being turned into a shelter. The irony was crushing him. But I wasn't done. There was one more thing. Lot 55, the auctioneer announced. A 2023 Porsche 911 GT3 RS, custom paint, less than 2,000 miles. Brad's head snapped up. This was it. This was his heart. This was the car he had bought the week after he told Maya they couldn't afford a new dishwasher. It was his baby. He loved this machine more than he loved his son. He stood up. He looked around the room, begging with his eyes, pleading for someone to save it, someone who would appreciate it. Opening bid $150,000. The hands flew up. This was a desirable car. It was fast, loud, and flashy. Everything Brad aspired to be. 170, 180, 200. Brad was pacing now. He was muttering to himself, "Please, please, not him. Anyone but him. 220, 230. The bidding slowed down. A guy in a red blazer was winning. He looked like a collector. Brad seemed relieved. At least it would go to a car guy. 300,000, I said. Brad spun around. "No," he shouted. "You can't. You don't even drive fast. You will ruin it." "Sir," the bailiff stepped forward, warning Brad to sit down. 300,000 going once, the auctioneer said, sweating. "Sold to Mr. Freeman." Brad collapsed into his chair, defeated. He looked at me with eyes full of tears. "You win, okay? You win. You took everything. Just take care of it. Don't scratch it." I walked to the front of the room to sign the papers. The valet brought the keys. They were heavy, sleek, modern. I took the keys. I turned to the crowd. "I didn't buy this car for myself," I said. "I have a truck. I like my truck." I looked toward the back of the room near the exit doors. Standing there, looking uncomfortable in her Sunday best, was Mrs. Higgins, the housekeeper, the woman who had sent me the video, the woman who had practically raised Brad while his parents were at galas, the woman Brad had fired 3 years ago because she had moved too slow while cleaning his office. "Mrs. Higgins," I called out, "could you come here, please?" The room turned. Mrs. Higgins walked forward, leaning on her cane. She looked terrified. She looked at me, then she looked at Brad. Brad stared at her. He recognized her. He looked confused. "Mrs. Higgins," I said when she reached me, "how long is your walk to the bus stop from your house?" "It is about a mile, mister." "Freeman," she said, her voice trembling. "And how long does the bus take to get to your new job?" "An hour and a half, sir. 2 transfers." "That is too long," I said. "You are 70 years old. You shouldn't be walking in the snow." I held up the keys to the Porsche. Brad stood up. He realized what was happening. His face went from pale to a deep, violent red. "No," he screamed. "No, you can't." "Mrs. Higgins," I said, ignoring him, "you provided a service to my family that was priceless. You gave us the truth, and the truth deserves a reward." I pressed the keys into her hand. "This is your car now." The room gasped, a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the space. "You are giving a $300,000 race car to a maid," a man in the front row whispered loud enough to be heard. "I am giving a reliable vehicle to a friend," I said. "Sell it. Drive it. Trade it in for a Cadillac and a condo in Florida. I don't care. It is yours." Brad lost his mind. He lunged over the chairs. "That is my car," he shrieked. "That is a GT3. She can't drive that. She is a cleaning lady. She will crash it. This is a travesty. You are spitting in my face." He was held back by the bailiffs. He was foaming at the mouth. It wasn't the loss of the money that broke him. It was the indignity. His symbol of virility, his symbol of status, was being handed to the woman who used to scrub his toilet. Mrs. Higgins looked at the keys. She looked at Brad. She saw the man she had fed when he was a boy, the man who had tossed her aside like garbage. She smiled. It was a slow, sweet smile. "Thank you, Mr. Freeman," she said. "I think I will sell it. I always wanted to retire to Boca." She turned to Brad. She waved the keys at him. "Goodbye, Mr. Bradley," she said. "Try not to make a mess in your cell. There is no one there to clean it up for you." Brad screamed a primal sound of pure ego death. The bailiffs dragged him out, kicking and screaming. He was being hauled away from the auction of his own life, watching the help drive away in his dreams. I walked back to Maya. She was smiling, a real smile. "You are enjoying this too much," she said. "I am just balancing the books, baby girl," I said. We walked out of the auction house. Mrs. Higgins was already outside looking at the car. She wasn't going to drive it. She was on the phone, probably with a dealer. She was smart. I looked at the empty space where the Sterling Empire used to be. It was gone, sold off for parts, donated to the people they despised. I put my arm around my daughter. "Let's go home," I said. "I have a garden to tend." But as we walked to my truck, I knew it wasn't over. Brad was broken, but he wasn't gone. And a man who has lost his pride is capable of anything. He had threatened to burn us down. And now that he had nothing left to lose, I believed him. We had taken his past. Now he would try to take our future, and I had to be ready to stop him permanently. The dust had settled on the auction floor, but the air in my basement command center was thick with a new kind of tension. I thought I had seen the bottom of Preston Sterling's soul. I thought his sins were limited to arrogance, greed, and the casual cruelty of a man who throws wine at women. I was wrong. The rabbit hole went deeper, and at the bottom, it wasn't just money, it was blood. Isaiah sat across from me at the reclaimed wood desk. He had loosened his tie for the first time in 10 years. His face, usually a mask of stoic professionalism, was pale. He looked sick. He pushed a stack of files toward me. They weren't the usual financial audits or bank statements. These were engineering reports, structural integrity assessments, internal emails from the construction supervisors at Sterling Developments. "You need to read this, sir," Isaiah said, his voice quiet and tight. We dug into the subcontractors for the Affordable Housing Initiative, the project the city gave him tax credits for, the one meant to house single mothers and veterans. I opened the file. I put on my reading glasses. The first page was a soil analysis. The second was a concrete density test. I read. My stomach turned over. "He cut the cement with sand," I whispered. "It is worse," Isaiah said. He swapped out the rebar. The specs called for grade 60 steel. He used grade 40 scrap metal, imported from a shell company in Southeast Asia. He pocketed the difference. $3 million in savings on materials alone. I looked at the photos attached to the report. Hairline cracks in the foundation of a building that was only 2 years old. Water damage in the load-bearing walls. "This building is occupied?" I asked, looking up at Isaiah. "Full occupancy," Isaiah nodded. 200 families. "If there is a minor earthquake, sir, or even a heavy snow load on the roof." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I saw the collapse in my mind. I saw the rubble. I saw the faces of people who looked like me, people who had scraped together enough for a deposit on a safe home only to be buried in a tomb built by Preston's greed. And the money I asked, my voice shaking with a rage that made the baseball bat incident feel like a playground squabble. Where did the savings go? Laundering, Isaiah said, sliding another file forward. He didn't put it back into the company. He funneled it through a consulting firm registered in the Cayman Islands, a firm owned by his wife. He washed the blood money and used it to buy the yacht we just sold. He used it to pay for Brad's wedding. He used it to buy that Cabernet Sauvignon. I closed the file. I took off my glasses and rubbed my eyes. This wasn't business anymore. It wasn't even vengeance. This was evil, pure, unadulterated evil. Preston Sterling wasn't just a bad businessman. He was a killer in a suit. He was willing to risk the lives of 200 families so he could feel like a big man at the country club. This changes everything, Isaiah, I said. Yes, sir, Isaiah agreed. This isn't a civil suit for fraud. This is criminal negligence. This is racketeering. I stood up and walked to the wall of evidence. I looked at Preston's picture. I had wanted to bankrupt him. I had wanted to humiliate him. But that wasn't enough. A man who does this doesn't deserve to be poor. He deserves to be erased. Call the U.S. attorney, I said. Isaiah blinked. The feds. The feds, I confirmed. This crosses state lines. The materials were imported. The wire transfers went offshore. This is federal jurisdiction. I want him in a hole so deep he has to look up to see hell. Isaiah nodded, pulling out his phone. I will set up the meeting. 2 hours later, we were sitting in a nondescript office in the federal building. The U.S. attorney was a woman named Sarah Jenkins. She was sharp, tough, and had a reputation for eating white-collar criminals for lunch. She looked at the files we had brought. She looked at the engineering reports. She looked at the bank transfers. Her face went hard. She looked at me. Mr. Freeman, she said, how did you get this? I bought the debt, I said. I own the company now. These are my files, and I am handing them to you. She flipped through the pages. This is horrifying, she murmured. He built a death trap. He built a piggy bank, I corrected her. He just didn't care who got smashed when he broke it open. Ms. Jenkins closed the file. She leaned back in her chair. You know what this means, she said. If we move on this, the civil assets freeze is just the beginning. We will seize everything. The investigation will take months. I don't care about the time, I said. I care about the verdict. I can get him on wire fraud today, she said, calculating. I can get him on money laundering by Friday. But the endangerment charges, that is the hammer. If we can prove he knew the materials were substandard. I handed her a flash drive. It is all there, I said, the emails. He signed off on the swaps personally. He called the high-grade steel a waste of margin. Jenkins took the drive. She looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and respect. Why, she asked. You already took his house. You took his company. Why go this far? I thought about Ruth. I thought about the $50. I thought about the families sleeping in those cracking buildings tonight, unaware that the roof over their heads was held up by lies. Because poverty is not a crime, I said softly. But exploiting it should be a capital offense, she nodded. We will convene a grand jury tomorrow, she said. With this evidence, he is looking at 20 years, minimum. He will die in prison, Mr. Freeman. Good, I said. We walked out of the federal building into the cold afternoon. The city looked different to me now. I looked at the skyline, and I wondered how many other buildings were rot masquerading as luxury. I wondered how many other Preston Sterlings were sitting in corner offices calculating the cost of a human life against the cost of steel. My phone rang. It was Maya. Dad, she said, her voice urgent. It is all over the news. The FBI just raided the Sterling offices again. They are bringing out boxes. It has started, I said. And Dad? Maya hesitated. Preston is on the news. He's being transferred from the county jail to federal holding. They denied his bail. I stopped walking. I looked at a TV screen in a shop window. There it was. The image of Preston Sterling. He wasn't wearing a suit anymore. He was wearing a gray jumpsuit. He was shackled at the waist. He looked old. He looked frail. He looked like exactly what he was, a criminal. The ticker at the bottom of the screen read, Developer charged with racketeering and endangerment. Death trap condos cited in indictment. I watched as they put him into a federal transport van. He looked at the camera. For a second I thought he could see me. I saw the confusion in his eyes. He still didn't understand. He thought the rules didn't apply to him. He thought he could buy his way out. He didn't realize that I had bought the rules too. Isaiah stood beside me watching the screen. 20 years, Isaiah said. He is 70. That is a life sentence. It is justice, I said. But as I watched the van drive away, a thought occurred to me. Preston was gone. He was neutralized. The head of the snake had been cut off, but the body was still thrashing. Brad was out there. He wasn't in federal custody. He was out on bail for the local charges. He was watching this too. He was watching his father being hauled away. He was watching his inheritance turn into evidence. He was watching his entire identity be dismantled brick by cheap brick. And Brad was weak. Weak men are dangerous because they panic. They don't have a code. They don't have a strategy. They just lash out. I turned to Isaiah. "Where is Brad?" I asked. Isaiah checked his phone. He is staying at a motel on the interstate. The cheap stay in. His credit cards are dead, so he paid cash. Probably the last cash he has. He is watching this, I said. He knows it is over. He has nothing left to lose. Isaiah agreed. That makes him volatile, I said. Increase the security on the farmhouse. Double the guard on Maya and Leo. You think he will try something? Isaiah asked. I think he blames me for everything, I said. He doesn't see the fraud. He doesn't see the bad concrete. He just sees the man who took his toys. And now that his father is gone, he is the head of the family. In his twisted mind, he has to avenge the house. I looked at the sky. It was turning gray. Snow was coming. Let's go home, Isaiah. I have a bad feeling. We drove back to the farm in silence. The victory felt hollow now. Taking down Preston was necessary. It was righteous. But it had unleashed a chaos that I couldn't fully control. I had backed a rat into a corner, and now the rat was loose. When we got to the farmhouse, Maya was waiting on the porch. She was holding Leo tight. "Did you see it?" she asked. "I saw it. Is it true, Dad?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Did he really build those houses with bad materials? Could they have collapsed?" I nodded. "Yes, Maya. He risked those families to buy a boat." Maya shuddered. She looked at Leo. She was thinking about what kind of blood ran in his veins. She was thinking about the man she had married, the son of a monster. "I am glad he is in jail," she whispered. "I am glad you stopped him." I hugged her, but my eyes were scanning the tree line. The woods were dark, the wind was picking up. "Go inside," I said. "Lock the doors." "Why, Dad?" "Just a precaution," I said. I didn't tell her that I could feel eyes on us. I didn't tell her that I knew Brad was out there somewhere in the dark, stewing in his failure, turning his shame into a weapon. I went into the house and went straight to the gun safe in the study. I took out my old service pistol. I checked the magazine. Full. I racked the slide. I sat in the dark living room facing the window. I watched the snow start to fall. It was white and clean, covering the world in silence. But silence can be deceptive. Preston was gone, but his legacy remained. And his legacy was a son who had never been told no until I told him. And tonight I had a feeling Brad was going to try to change the answer. I waited. The snow fell harder. And in the distance I saw a single pair of headlights turn off the main road and start up my long driveway. They moved slowly, stealthily. "Here we go," I whispered to the empty room. The final act was about to begin, and this time it wouldn't be fought with lawyers or bank transfers. It would be fought with fire. Christmas Eve should smell like pine needles and cinnamon. It should smell like the roast beef Maya had been slow cooking since dawn and the wood smoke drifting lazily from the chimney. But as I sat in the leather armchair in the living room reading a bedtime story to my grandson Leo, the air suddenly grew heavy with a different scent. It was sharp, chemical, and terrifyingly familiar. It was the smell of gasoline. Not a spill, not a leak. It was the smell of accelerant being poured with purpose. I stopped reading mid-sentence. Leo looked up at me, his big eyes reflecting the twinkling lights of the Christmas tree in the corner. "Grandpa?" "Why did you stop?" he asked. I held up a hand for silence. I engaged the senses I hadn't used since I was patrolling the Mekong Delta 50 years ago. I heard the crunch of snow outside the front window. I heard the slosh of liquid hitting the siding of the house. And I heard the heavy, ragged breathing of a man who has lost his mind. "Leo," I said, keeping my voice calm and low, "I need you to play a game with me. I need you to go to the kitchen right now. Get your mom and go out the back door. Do not put on your shoes. Do not stop for your coat. Just go." Leo hesitated, sensing the tension in my frame. "Grandpa, are we in danger?" "Go, Leo," I said, adding a layer of command to my voice that brokered no argument. "Now." He ran. I followed him, moving faster than a man of 75 should be able to move. Maya was in the kitchen drying a dish. She saw my face and dropped the towel. "Dad, what is it?" "Take the boy to the barn," I whispered, pointing to the back door. "Lock the door from the inside. Call Cole. Tell him we have a perimeter breach. Tell him the house is being torched." "Torched?" Maya gasped. "Go!" I shouted. As soon as the back door clicked shut behind them, the front of the house erupted. It wasn't an explosion. It was a whoosh, a sudden intake of breath by a fire dragon. An orange glow flared against the front windows, turning the snowy night into a hellscape. The heat radiated through the glass instantly. I grabbed the fire extinguisher I kept in the hallway, not that it would do much against arson, but old habits die hard. I didn't run away. I ran toward the fire. I needed to know. I needed to see him do it. I kicked open the front door. The porch was a wall of flame. The old wood, dry from the winter air, was drinking the gasoline and spitting out black smoke. Through the dancing inferno, I saw him. Brad was standing in the middle of the yard. He was illuminated by the firelight, looking like a demon rising from the pit. He was holding a red jerry can in one hand and a road flare in the other. He wasn't wearing a coat. He was wearing a tuxedo, a tattered, dirty tuxedo, likely the only suit he had left from his former life. He was laughing. It was a sound that had no joy in it, only madness. "Merry Christmas!" "Elijah," he screamed, throwing the empty can into the fire. "I brought you a housewarming gift." I stepped out onto the burning porch, shielding my face with my arm. The heat was intense, singeing the hair on my arms, but I didn't feel it. I only felt the cold steel resolve that had kept me alive in the jungle. "Brad!" I yelled, my voice cutting over the roar of the flames. "You are done. Put the flare down." He saw me. His eyes went wide. He smiled a rictus grin of pure hate. "I am not done," he shrieked. "I am just getting started. You took my house, old man. Now I take yours. You took my life. Now I take yours. Burn. Burn with your trash." He took a step toward the house, intending to throw the flare through the open door to finish the job. He wanted to burn us alive. He didn't know Maya and Leo were out back. He thought he was killing his wife and son. That realization snapped something inside me. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. It was war. I didn't wait for him to throw it. I charged. I leaped off the porch steps, clearing the flames, my boots hitting the snow with a thud. Brad looked surprised. He expected me to cower. He expected the old gardener to beg for mercy. He didn't expect a freight train. I closed the distance between us in 3 seconds. Brad panicked. He swung the flare at my face, a wild, desperate arc meant to blind me. He was young. He was strong. But he was a brawler. I was a soldier. I didn't step back. I stepped in. I ducked under the flare, letting the heat hiss past my ear. I stepped inside his guard, my body moving on muscle memory that had been dormant for decades but never forgotten. I grabbed his right wrist, the one holding the flare, with my left hand. I twisted it outward, using his own momentum against him. He screamed as the joint popped, but I wasn't done. I stepped behind him, kicking the back of his knee. He buckled. As he fell, I kept hold of his arm. I leveraged it over my shoulder. It is a simple move, a breaker move. It requires no strength, only physics, and the will to do harm. I pulled down. There was a sound like a dry branch snapping in a winter storm. It was loud. It was final. Brad shrieked a sound that tore through the night, a high-pitched wail of agony that drowned out the crackle of the fire. The flare dropped from his useless hand, hissing out in the snow. He hit the ground hard, writhing, clutching his broken arm. The bone was compromised. He wouldn't be throwing wine or gasoline at anyone ever again. I stood over him, breathing hard, the cold air burning my lungs. The fire on the porch was spreading, licking up the siding toward the roof. "You broke my arm," Brad screamed, sobbing into the snow. "You broke my arm, you animal! You tried to burn my grandson alive," I said, looking down at him with zero pity. "You are lucky I didn't break your neck." He looked up at me, his face streaked with soot and tears. The madness had drained out of him, replaced by the shock of pain. "It is your fault," he blubbered like a child. "You made me do this. You took everything. I am a Sterling. I am supposed to win." "You are not a Sterling anymore, Brad," I said. "You are an inmate." Cole and the security team arrived, then their SUVs tearing across the lawn, ignoring the driveway. They jumped out, fire extinguishers in hand. 2 of them ran to the porch, spraying white foam onto the flames, battling to save the house. The other two ran to me, weapons drawn. "Secure him," I said, pointing at Brad. "He is injured. Watch the arm." Cole looked at Brad, moaning on the ground, then at me. He saw the way I was standing, the way my hands were still curled into combat fists. He nodded. "Clear, Sir," Cole said. "We have the fire department en route. Maya and the boy are safe in the barn." I exhaled. The tension left my shoulders, and suddenly I felt every one of my 75 years. My knees ached, my back hurt, but I was standing. Brad was still screaming as they handcuffed his good hand to his belt. "My father will kill you," he shouted, delirious with pain. "He will buy the prison and burn you in it." "Your father is in solitary confinement, Brad," I said. "He can't buy a pack of cigarettes, let alone a hitman. It is over." I turned away from him and walked toward the barn. The fire on the porch was dying down thanks to my team. The house was scorched, scarred, but standing. It would survive. Just like us. Maya ran out of the barn when she saw me. She checked me for burns, her hands fluttering over my face and arms. "Dad," she cried. "Dad, are you okay?" "I am fine, baby girl," I said. Leo peeked out from behind her legs. He saw the flashing lights. He saw his father being lifted onto a stretcher by the arriving paramedics, his arm at a wrong angle, screaming curses at the sky. "Is he hurt?" Leo asked. "Yes," I said. "He fell." Maya looked at me. She knew. She saw the set of my jaw. She knew Brad hadn't fallen. She knew I had put him down. She hugged me, burying her face in my chest. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving us." I looked over her head at the stretcher being loaded into the ambulance. Brad was still thrashing, still blaming the world for his failures. He was a man who had been given everything and had turned it into ash. He wanted a fire, I thought. He got one. Sheriff Miller walked up to me, his notebook out. He looked at the house, then at the ambulance. "Self-defense, Mr. Freeman," the sheriff asked, writing it down before I even answered. He came at me with a flare. "Sheriff," I said. I feared for my life. "That matches the evidence," the sheriff said, closing his notebook. "Arson, attempted murder, assault, and violation of a restraining order. He is done, Elijah. He is never getting out." I nodded. Good. I walked back into my house. The front door was gone, burned away. The hallway smelled of smoke, but the structure was sound. The foundation was rock. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. My hand was shaking now just a little. The adrenaline crash. I sat down at the table. I looked at the empty chair where Brad had sat just a week ago, demanding his wife come home to serve him. "You wanted a war, son," I whispered to the empty room. "You forgot one thing. Soldiers don't fight for money. They fight for home." And this house, I thought, looking at the scorched walls, this house is protected by something stronger than steel. It is protected by a father's love. And that is a wall you cannot burn down. The courthouse was air-conditioned to a temperature that felt like the inside of a morgue, which was fitting, because today we were burying the last remnants of the Sterling name. 6 months had passed since the night the sky turned orange over my farmhouse. 6 months of depositions, motions, and the slow grinding gears of the federal justice system. I sat in the front row again, but this time the dynamic had shifted. I wasn't the plaintiff fighting for custody. I was the witness for the prosecution in the United States versus Preston and Bradley Sterling. They sat at the defense table, separated by their lawyers. They weren't wearing Italian suits today. They were wearing county orange. Preston looked 20 years older. His silver hair was thin and yellowing, his skin hanging off his bones like wet paper. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a twitchy, desperate fear. Brad looked worse. His cast was gone, but his arm hung stiffly at his side, a permanent reminder of the night he tried to burn my family alive. He stared at the table, refusing to look at his father. The trial had been a spectacle. The prosecution had laid out the case like a master mason laying bricks. The fraud, the embezzlement, the substandard steel in the housing projects, the arson, the kidnapping attempt. It was a wall of evidence so high they couldn't climb over it. So they did the only thing rats do when the ship goes down. They started eating each other. I watched as Preston took the stand. He walked with a shuffle, the chains around his ankles clinking softly. He swore to tell the truth, but I knew he wouldn't know the truth if it bit him. "Mr. Sterling," his lawyer asked, trying to salvage some dignity for his client, "did you instruct your son to commit arson? Did you tell him to kidnap his child?" Preston looked at the jury, his eyes wide and watery. He put on a mask of the grieving, confused patriarch. "No, never," he rasped, his voice trembling. I am a businessman. I build things, I don't burn them down. It was Bradley. He has always been unstable. I heard Brad make a noise in his throat, a strangled growl. Preston continued gaining confidence as he threw his son under the bus. Bradley has a gambling problem. He has a spending problem. He drained the company accounts. I didn't know about the concrete swaps until it was too late. I was trying to cover for him. I was trying to save the family business from his recklessness. He is the one who was obsessed with revenge. He is the one who attacked Mr. Freeman. I am just a father who loved his son too much to stop him. It was a lie so bold it was almost impressive. He was blaming the boy he had twisted for being twisted. When it was Brad's turn, he didn't even wait for the questions. He exploded. "He is lying," Brad shouted from the stand, pointing a shaking finger at his father. "He taught me everything. He told me the poor were fuel for the rich. He showed me how to cook the books when I was 22. He told me to use the cheap steel. He said, 'They are just poor people, Brad. They won't know the difference until the roof falls in.'" The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel, but Brad kept screaming. "He told me to take Leo. He said, 'Get the boy and we have leverage.' He told me to burn the farmhouse. He said, 'If we can't have it, nobody can.' He is the monster." I just wanted my dad to be proud of me. I watched them tear each other apart. It was tragic, and it was inevitable. Evil doesn't have loyalty. It only has appetite. And when there is nothing left to consume, it consumes itself. Then it was my turn. I walked to the stand. I felt the eyes of the jury on me. They knew who I was now. They knew about the trucking empire. They knew about the secret millions. But I didn't walk like a billionaire. I walked like a father, Mr. Freeman, the prosecutor said. "You have heard the defendants blaming each other. You have heard them talk about money, about pressure, about business. What do you have to say to them?" I looked at Preston. I looked at Brad. I didn't feel hate anymore. Hate takes energy, and they weren't worth the calories. I felt pity. Deep, profound pity for two men who had everything and ended up with nothing. I leaned into the microphone. "I don't care about their money," I said, my voice filling the room. "I don't care about the buildings or the yachts or the cars. I bought those things to show them that they aren't special. But that isn't why we are here." I looked at Brad directly. "You threw wine at my daughter," I said. "You tried to stain her. You thought that because she came from me, she was dirty. You thought that because you lived in a big house, you were clean." I turned to Preston. "You built houses that could kill people to save a few dollars. You treated human beings like line items on a spreadsheet. You forgot that every dollar you stole was a piece of someone's life." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "Money can buy this building," I said, gesturing to the ornate courtroom. "It can buy the flag in the corner. It can buy the suit on your lawyer's back. But money cannot buy respect. It cannot buy character. And it certainly cannot buy peace." Preston looked down. Brad was crying silently. "You threw wine at my daughter," I continued, my voice dropping to a whisper. "You tried to humiliate us, but you didn't stain us. We wash off, we endure, we stand tall. You too, you drank the poison yourselves. You brewed it in your greed and you drank it in your arrogance, and now you are choking on it." I stood up. "I have nothing else to say," I said. "The debt is paid." I walked back to my seat. Maya took my hand. Her grip was strong. She wasn't the scared woman at the dinner table anymore. She was the daughter of Elijah Freeman. The jury didn't take long. There was too much evidence. There were too many confessions. The verdict was guilty on all counts: racketeering, fraud, endangerment, arson, kidnapping, conspiracy. The sentencing hearing was immediate. The judge, a stern woman with no patience for white-collar cruelty, looked at the Sterlings with disdain. "Preston Sterling," she said, "you were the architect of this misery. You led your son down a path of destruction. You endangered hundreds of lives for profit. I sentence you to 15 years in federal prison." Preston slumped. 15 years. He was 70. He would die in a cage. The realization hit him, and he let out a sob that sounded like a dry branch snapping. Bradley Sterling, the judge, continued. "You allowed your entitlement to turn into violence. You attacked an elderly man. You terrorized your own child. You set a fire that could have killed 3 people. I sentence you to 10 years in federal prison." Brad closed his eyes. 10 years. He would miss Leo's childhood. He would miss his son growing up. He had traded his family for an ego that was now shattered. The bailiffs moved in. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut echoed in the room. Brad turned to look at us one last time as they hauled him away. "Maya," he whispered. Maya didn't look away. She didn't flinch. "Goodbye, Brad," she said softly. They led them out the side door. The heavy wood closed behind them, sealing their fate. The Sterling name, which had been plastered on buildings all over the city, was now just a number in a federal database. We walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. The air smelled of spring. The snow had melted. The world was waking up. Isaiah was waiting by the car. He looked at me and nodded. "It is done, sir," Isaiah said. "It is done," I agreed. We got into the truck, not the Porsche. I had sold the Porsche and given the money to the food bank. We got into my old Ford. "Where to?" Dad Maya asked. "Home," I said. "I have to plant the tomatoes." We drove away, leaving the city behind. I looked in the rearview mirror, but I didn't see the courthouse. I saw the future. I saw Leo growing up without fear. I saw Maya building her own life. And I saw myself sitting on my porch watching the sun go down, knowing that I had kept my promise to Ruth. I had balanced the scales, and I had done it without losing my soul. The silence that follows the fall of an empire is not empty. It is heavy with the dust of what used to be. For weeks, the moving trucks lined up outside the Sterling estate like a funeral procession for a lifestyle that had been dead for years. I didn't go to watch the mansion being emptied. I had seen enough of that house. I didn't need to see the marble statues being crated up or the chandeliers being lowered. But there was one final act of this tragedy that I felt compelled to witness. It was a Tuesday afternoon, gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that seeps into your bones. I parked my truck across the street from a complex of brick buildings on the south side of the city. These were the Riverview Apartments, the affordable housing project that Preston Sterling had built, the project where he had swapped steel for scrap and concrete for sand to line his pockets. It was the project that had sent him to federal prison. A taxi pulled up to the curb. It wasn't a limousine. It was a beat-up yellow sedan with a dented fender. The back door opened and Linda Sterling stepped out. She looked like a refugee from another world. She was wearing a Chanel coat that looked absurd against the backdrop of graffiti and peeling paint. She carried 2 Louis Vuitton suitcases, the last remnants of a fortune that had evaporated into legal fees and restitution payments. She stood on the sidewalk looking up at the building. I saw her shudder. The irony was sharp enough to cut glass. The court had seized the mansion, the vacation homes, and the accounts. Linda had been left with nothing but a small stipend and her name, which was now a liability rather than an asset. Because of the housing crisis caused in part by her husband's fraudulent practices, the only place she could afford, the only place that had a vacancy, was here, in the very building her husband had built to warehouse the poor. I watched her drag her suitcases toward the entrance of Block C. I watched her struggle with the heavy glass door. The doorman she was used to having was gone, replaced by a broken buzzer system. She stopped for a moment, looking at a crack running up the exterior wall. It was a hairline fracture in the brickwork, a physical scar of Preston's greed. She touched it with a gloved hand. I wondered if she knew. I wondered if she realized that the roof over her head was held up by lies. She disappeared inside. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I felt a grim sense of balance. The universe has a way of correcting itself, even if it takes 50 years. The woman who had lived in a palace built on the backs of the poor was now living among them, sleeping in a room constructed by her husband's avarice. It was a prison of her own making, even if the bars were made of cheap drywall instead of steel. I put the truck in gear and drove away. I had one more stop to make. My daughter was waiting for me in a small, dusty office space in the Arts District. It was a converted warehouse with exposed brick walls and large industrial windows that let in the northern light. It was empty, save for a few drafting tables and a coffee machine, but to me it looked like a palace. Maya was standing in the center of the room holding a roll of blueprints. She looked tired, but her eyes were bright. She wasn't wearing the designer clothes Brad used to demand she wear. She was wearing jeans and a work shirt, her hair tied back with a pencil. She looked like herself. "Dad," she said, smiling as I walked in. "What do you think?" "It has good bones," I said, tapping a solid wooden beam. "Strong foundation." "It is going to be great," she said, unrolling the blueprints on a table. "I have the layout for the reception here, the design studio in the back. I already have 3 clients lined up, Dad. People who heard about the trial, people who want to work with someone who stands up to bullies." I looked at the plans. They were brilliant. Maya was a talented architect, but she had been stifled by the Sterling name, forced to design gaudy monuments to ego. Now she was free to build things that mattered. "There is just one thing," she said, her expression turning serious. "I need to sign the papers." I reached into my jacket and pulled out a checkbook. I had already written the check. It was for $200,000, enough to cover the lease, the renovations, and the payroll for a year. "Here," I said, handing it to her. "Consider it an investment." Maya didn't take it. She looked at the check, then she looked at me. "No, Dad," she said. I frowned. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, I don't want a gift," she said firmly. "I don't want a handout. That is what Brad wanted. That is what Preston wanted. They wanted things given to them. They thought they deserved it just for existing." She walked over to a box on the floor and pulled out a legal document she had drafted herself. "I want a loan," she said, placing the paper on the table. "A business loan, market interest rates, a repayment schedule. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. I'm going to earn it." I looked at the document. It was a standard loan agreement. The terms were fair, maybe even a little tough. She was betting on herself. "You are a Freeman," I said, feeling a lump in my throat. "I am," she said. She had already filed the paperwork. Maya Sterling was dead. Maya Freeman was born. She had scrubbed the stain of her marriage from her name, just as she had scrubbed the wine from her face. I took a pen from my pocket. I didn't argue. I didn't try to soften the terms. I respected her too much for that. I signed the loan agreement as the lender. "Pleasure doing business with you, Ms. Freeman," I said, shaking her hand. "Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Freeman," she replied, her grip strong. She pinned a sign to the wall. It was a mock-up of her new logo. Freeman Architecture. Underneath it was a slogan, "Built to last." I looked at it and I thought of Ruth. I thought of how she would have been so proud, not because Maya was opening a business, but because she was doing it with her head held high, owing nothing to anyone but herself. We left the office and picked up Leo from school. It was Friday. Leo came running out of the gates of St. Jude's Academy. He was wearing his blazer and tie, looking like a miniature gentleman, but in his backpack alongside his textbooks were a pair of work boots and heavy gloves. "Grandpa," he yelled, jumping into the truck. "Are we still going?" "We are still going," I said. Most kids at St. Jude's spent their weekends playing video games or going to the country club. Leo Freeman spent his weekends at the Southside Community Garden and the soup kitchen down the block. It wasn't a punishment. It was an education. We drove to the garden, a plot of land I had bought and donated to the neighborhood years ago. It was where I grew the vegetables that Brad had mocked. Now it was a source of fresh food for 50 families. Leo changed in the truck, shedding the blazer for a flannel shirt that matched mine. He laced up his boots. He didn't complain. He didn't ask why he had to work. He knew. We spent the afternoon weeding the winter beds and prepping the soil for the spring. Leo worked hard. He got dirt under his fingernails. He sweated. "Grandpa," he asked as we took a break drinking water from a thermos, "why did Dad hate this?" I looked at my grandson. He was 12 years old, but he had aged 10 years in the last 6 months. He had seen his father arrested. He had testified to the police. He had lost his home, but he hadn't broken. "Your dad didn't hate the dirt, Leo," I said. "He hated the work. He thought he was too good for it." "Am I too good for it?" Leo asked, looking at his dirty hands. I took his hand in mine. "Leo, look at these hands," I said, showing him my calluses. "These hands built an empire. These hands paid for your school. There is no work that is beneath you if it helps someone. There is no job that is shameful if you do it with honor. The only shameful thing is taking what isn't yours." He nodded. "Dad took things," he said softly. "Yes," I said. "And now he has nothing." We packed up the tools as the sun began to set. We drove to the soup kitchen on 4th Street. It was busy. The line stretched around the block. The economy was tough and people were hurting. Leo put on an apron. He stood behind the serving line. He didn't look at the people with pity. He looked at them with respect. He looked them in the eye just as I had taught him. "Hello, sir," he would say. "Would you like some bread?" I watched him from the back of the room. I saw a man in a tattered coat take the bread from Leo. The man's hands were shaking. Leo waited. He didn't rush him. He smiled. "Thank you, young man," the man said. "You are welcome," Leo replied. My heart swelled. This was the legacy. Not the money, not the patents, not the buildings. This. A boy who knew that his worth wasn't determined by the crest on his blazer, but by the kindness in his heart. Brad had tried to turn him into a Sterling. He had tried to teach him that the world existed to serve him, but the blood of Ruth Freeman was too strong. The roots were too deep. We drove home in the dark, the heater humming in the truck. Leo fell asleep, his head against the window, exhausted but content. I looked at him and I saw the future. He would inherit everything one day. The trust, the company, the millions. But he wouldn't be like Preston. He wouldn't be like Brad. He would know the weight of a dollar. He would know the texture of soil. He would know that you don't build a life by stepping on people, you build it by lifting them up. I pulled into the driveway of the farmhouse. The repairs were finished. The scorch marks were gone, painted over and sealed. The porch was new strong oak that would last another 100 years. I carried Leo inside. Maya was waiting with dinner. The house smelled of rosemary and garlic. It smelled like a home. I put Leo to bed, covering him with the quilt Ruth had sewn 40 years ago. "Sleep tight, little man," I whispered. I went downstairs. Maya handed me a glass of wine. It wasn't an expensive vintage. It was a $20 bottle from the local store. "To the new firm," she said, raising her glass. "To Freeman Architecture," I said, clinking my glass against hers. "And to freedom," she added. I took a sip. It tasted better than any $1,000 bottle Preston Sterling had ever hoarded. It tasted clean. We sat by the fire watching the flames dance. We didn't talk about Brad. We didn't talk about the trial. We talked about the garden. We talked about the design for a new library wing Maya was bidding on. We talked about life. The storm had passed. The wreckage had been cleared. And in the space where the lies used to be, we had planted something true. I looked at the fire and I realized that for the first time in my life I wasn't angry. The fire inside me, the one that had burned since the day Ruth died, had finally settled into a warm, steady glow. I wasn't just a survivor anymore. I was a builder. And I had just laid the last brick of the most important project of my life. My family. The smell of roasted turkey and collard greens filled every corner of my farmhouse. It was a smell that didn't just make your mouth water, it made your soul settle. Outside, the November wind was stripping the last of the leaves from the oak trees, but inside the fire was roaring and the air was thick with the kind of laughter that comes from the belly, not the throat. It had been exactly 1 year since the dinner at the Sterling mansion. 1 year since the wine hit my daughter's face. 1 year since I decided to burn down an empire to save my family. I stood in the kitchen carving the bird. My hands were steady. My arthritis was acting up a bit with the cold, but it was a good pain, an honest pain. This year, the table wasn't made of mahogany imported from a rainforest. It was made of pine scarred and knotted, built by my own hands 30 years ago. The plates weren't bone china. They were mismatched ceramics bought at local markets. And the guests weren't senators or hedge fund managers looking for a tax loophole. Mrs. Higgins sat at the head of the table. She was wearing a silk scarf and looking 10 years younger than she had at the auction. She had sold the Porsche, bought a condo in Florida, and a sensible sedan, and donated the rest to a scholarship fund for maids' children. She was telling a story about Preston Sterling trying to microwave a turkey once because he didn't know how to turn on the oven, and the whole room was shaking with laughter. Isaiah was there too. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing a cable-knit sweater that looked comfortable and entirely unlawyer-like. He was laughing with Leo, showing him a magic trick with a coin. Leo's eyes were bright. The shadow of fear that had haunted him for months was gone, replaced by the light of a boy who knows he is safe. Maya walked past me carrying a bowl of mashed potatoes. She squeezed my arm. She looked radiant. Her hair was loose, her smile easy. She wasn't the terrified woman wiping wine from her eyes anymore. She was the owner of Freeman Architecture, a woman who had just landed a contract to design the new community center in the worst part of town, not for profit, but for purpose. "Dad," she said, leaning in. "The mail came late today. There is something for you." She handed me a single piece of mail. It was a postcard. It wasn't a holiday card. It was a plain white card stamped with the seal of the Federal Correctional Institution. I wiped my hands on my apron and took it. I recognized the handwriting immediately, though it was shaky now, stripped of its arrogant flourish. It was from Preston. I walked over to the window away from the joy of the party to read it. "Elijah," the card read, "the food here is slop. The commissary is expensive. I need toothpaste. I need coffee. I know you took everything, but surely you can spare $50 for an old man. Consider it a consultation fee. I built this city. I deserve better than this. Preston." I stared at the words. Even in prison, even after losing everything, he still believed he deserved more. He still believed the world owed him comfort. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't ask about his grandson. He asked for money. I looked at the table where my family was eating. I looked at the food we had prepared with love. I thought about Ruth dying because we didn't have $50 for medicine. I thought about the $50 Preston had refused to lend me. I walked to my desk in the corner of the living room. I opened the drawer and took out my checkbook. I pulled out a pen. I wrote a check. Pay to the order of Preston Sterling. Amount $0.50. In the memo line I wrote for the medicine. I took a piece of stationery and wrote a short note. Dear Preston, you said you built the city. Now you can build character. $50 is a lot of money. I suggest you learn to save like I did. Start with this. Elijah. I put the check and the note in an envelope and sealed it. I would mail it tomorrow. It was petty, perhaps, but it was also the final lesson. The books were balanced down to the last cent. I walked back to the table. Who was it? Grandpa Leo asked, his mouth full of stuffing. Just an old acquaintance, Leo, I said, sitting down. Someone who forgot the value of $1. Isaiah looked at me. He saw the envelope in my pocket. He knew. He raised his glass. To new traditions, Isaiah said. To new traditions, the table echoed. I reached for the bottle of wine in the center of the table. It wasn't a vintage Cabernet that cost a mortgage payment. It was a $20 Merlot from a vineyard up the road. I poured a glass. The red liquid swirled in the light, rich and dark. I looked at Maya. She was watching me. She saw the wine. For a second, I saw a flicker of the old memory, the stain on the white silk. But then she smiled. She picked up her own glass. I stood up. I want to propose a toast, I said. The room went quiet. A year ago, I said, looking at each of them. In turn, we sat at a table where we weren't welcome. We sat in silence while we were insulted. We let people who were smaller than us make us feel small. I looked at Leo. But tonight we are sitting at a table built by work. We are eating food bought with honest money, and we are surrounded by people who know the meaning of the word loyalty. I raised the glass higher. To Ruth, I said, my voice thick with emotion, who never got to sit here but who built the foundation this house stands on. To Ruth, everyone said. I took a sip of the wine. It was delicious. It tasted like blackberries and earth. It didn't taste like shame. It tasted like victory. I looked at Maya's shirt. It was white, pristine. There were no stains. There never would be again. The dinner continued late into the night. We ate pie, we told stories, we played cards. It was the kind of night that anchors you, the kind of night you remember when the world gets cold. As the guests started to leave, I walked Mrs. Higgins to her car. Thank you, Elijah, she said, patting my cheek. That was the best meal I have had in years. You are welcome, Mrs. Higgins, I said. Drive safe. I watched her drive away. I stood on the porch for a moment, breathing in the cold air. The stars were bright. The world was quiet. I thought about Preston in his cell, staring at the ceiling, waiting for a check that would buy him nothing but a hard lesson. I thought about Brad in his cell, probably still blaming me for his broken arm and his broken life. They were gone. They were ghosts. I walked back inside. Maya was washing dishes. Leo was asleep on the rug in front of the fire. I picked up the dish rag and started drying. You don't have to do that, Dad, Maya said. I got it. We do it together, I said. That is how it works. We worked in silence, the rhythm of the chores familiar and comforting. When we were done, the kitchen was clean, the house was warm. I looked at my daughter. She was strong, she was happy, she was free. Happy Thanksgiving, baby girl, I said, kissing her cheek. Happy Thanksgiving, Dad. I turned off the lights and we went upstairs. The farmhouse settled into the night, its timbers creaking in the wind. It wasn't a mansion, it didn't have marble floors or gold fixtures, but it had something the Sterling estate never had. It had peace. And as I lay in bed listening to the wind, I knew that I had finally kept my promise. I had protected them. I had fought the war and I had won. True power isn't about how loud you can shout or how expensive your suit is. It is the quiet confidence of knowing exactly who you are. The Sterlings thought their wealth gave them the right to humiliate others, but they forgot that dignity is the only currency that never devalues. You can inherit money, but you cannot inherit class. Character is built in the trenches of life, not in country clubs. In the end, when you strip away the bank accounts and the titles, all you have left is how you treated people. And that is a legacy you write every single day. True power isn't determined by the balance in your bank account, but by the strength of your character. The Sterlings thought they could buy respect and treat people as disposable assets, but they learned the hard way that dignity cannot be purchased. You can inherit a fortune, but you cannot inherit class. Real wealth is found in the way we treat others, especially when we think no one is watching. In the end, when the noise fades and the money is gone, all that remains is your integrity. That is the only legacy worth leaving behind. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments what would you have done in my place.